Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode number 208. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by Chris Reagan. Chris, welcome. You're holding a mic like a talk show host. I love that. You know, we got to get you one of those long Price is Right mics.
Yeah. Yeah, at this point, I might as well just keep holding it forever from here on out.
For sure.
Yeah.
Looks like you're going to spit a hot rat. Like in a
cipher, if you will.
Yeah, cipher. Sure. How's life? How are you doing, my friend?
Good. I've been moving around a lot. Been meeting with some sponsor people. I'm meeting at VidCon later tonight with a bunch of content creators. See if I can get some people on the Star Tank.
Cool.
And also just in general to just hang out. There's going to be some people there that I haven't seen in a long time. And the Act Man, who is like the center of like a huge like YouTube kerfuffle right now, is going to be there. So we get to talk to him for the first time since I think PAX 4 or 5 years ago. But aside from that, I've just been working, editing some stuff, shooting a little bit of stuff out here. I have some videos like just sitting on my channel waiting to be published because I figured like, I'll just make stuff in advance to post while I'm out here. But
very nice.
Maybe that'll go live in the next day or two, but been chilling.
Good. We're going to have some inquiries from the audience for you about some things you've been saying, but we're not going to get to them quite yet. Before we do that, we'll get Dustin Furman involved, executive producer of Last Stand Media. Dustin, tell me about your life.
I'm doing good, doing great. Actually, I was in Virginia last week that you guys saw on the video version. Now I'm back home, and it's weird because I feel like sometimes when you travel, it seems to like bunch up together. It's like traveling attracts other traveling, and so I'm getting ready to travel again tomorrow to Philadelphia, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And it's one of those things where it's like, this is kind of, I had like days in between, like first I was Cedar Point, then Virginia, and now this. And it's kind of like after this, I'm good for the rest of the summer, I think. Like I don't need to really go anywhere. I kind of just want to be at home in this dark room and, do mysterious shit, like play games or something.
It's not that mysterious, but I totally understand. Yeah, no. Maybe mysterious things in the game. I mean, that's totally fine. But
yeah, definitely.
I'm interested in this traveling, attracting other traveling. I feel like that is like something that you would read in Poor Richard's Almanac in the 18th century, like a piece of wisdom from Benjamin Franklin. You know, like pests and fish stink after 3 days, that kind of thing. Like traveling attracts other traveling.
Right.
I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. It seems to always be the case for me. I mean, maybe it's just because I'm not good at thinking that far ahead, or it's just these things tend to, I don't know, just sometimes it just happens to be together. And so it's like you get home, you're home for a few days. It's the worst, though, if you've ever had to, like, if you've been gone for a week and then you're home like 2 days and then you got to leave again. There's nothing worse than that. I've had almost a whole week at home before this, and this next trip is short. So it's not that bad, but I've done that quick turnaround, and there's nothing worse than that.
Other people traveling gives me agita. Because it's just the thought of me having to go somewhere gives me agita. So like my sister Dana is she's a teacher and she has 3 boys, and her husband, my brother-in-law, is a principal of a middle school. So they like just go and travel all over the place over the summer and I'm just like, just by being around them, it stresses me out. I'm like, I don't want to go anywhere and do anything. Just when you come back, pretend as if you didn't leave, because it stresses me out when you tell me about your trip.
Yeah, traveling is hell. Like it's not even really being in the plane or nothing. I feel like to me, it's like the airport trip, like specifically the airport that fucks it up. I had like a whole thing where like my plane, I think the doors to my plane closed at 9:15 and I got there at 9:17, and they let me on anyway because I looked like I had gone through hell to get there.
Yeah, you don't got to play it so by the book. You know, airlines, it's a little much.
Yeah, it's a bit much.
Be a little bit looser for you. Yeah, you told the full story about that on the Quarry spoiler cast, I think, right? Is that where we heard it? Or was it?
I don't remember. I can't. I think I'm not sure if I told it.
That.
I think I told it.
It was on the Quarry show. It's just not out yet. It will be on Saturday.
Gotcha.
Jesus Christ.
So I'm glad everyone's well. I'm glad we're all situated. We're here for Sacred Symbols. Thank you all out there for being with us, for your kindness and support. Remember, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia for early ad-free access to every episode of the show. 2 episodes a week of Sacred Symbols Plus, our supplemental podcast, and the ability to submit your questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas. Even get your name in the credits. Recent Sacred Symbols Plus episodes, as we just teased, we did a hour plus, pretty lengthy actually, conversation, more like an hour and a half, I think. Quarry conversation, spoiler cast, and review discussion. I would say we got Ben involved, our associate editor, as well, so that was the 4 of us, and I think we had 4 very different experiences with the game, or what I wouldn't say very different, but a staggering. Micah was asking, like, what did everyone think of it? And I said I felt like there was a stagger, like a tier system, in which I was like the lowest and someone else would be the highest, and 2 people slotted in the middle. So look forward to that. It'll go live the day after this goes live for patrons. I did a really awesome episode about PlayStation VR with what's his name? I already forgot. Brian, right?
Brian, yeah.
Yeah, from PSVR Without Parole. I'm so bad with names until they get fucking jammed into my head, man. I'm learning that more and more in my neighborhood too, where it's like, oh, I don't know anyone's name. Super Perils of Baking, making of. We got everyone that worked on the game involved in the game to talk about our different experiences with it. A lot of people were really interested that I finally told the story about how we had to remove a reference to Taiwan being a country from the PS4 and PS5 versions of Super Perils of Baking, and I talk about that in the show, and so people might particularly be interested in that angle. One about Street Fighter. I'm sorry, Dustin.
That explains the Arc System Works. Just to add that's something we talked about in the show that we never understood. Yeah, and that brought some context.
Right, exactly. And Ben brought up some information to bear where, because it's in their documentation that you can't do it, but we explicitly asked apparently, which I didn't know, and they were like, no, because I wrote a poem. So Super Perils of Baking has an enemy compendium that is a cookbook. So I wrote a cookbook, and it's like a fake cookbook. It's like, so there's a cookie. It's like, get flour and get water and all these things. But then it gets crazier and crazier. Then there's a little description. And for the toaster, I wrote about how the toaster was made for $1 a day in China. So of course it doesn't work. And then one of them, like, it was, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the different steps. And the 5th step was just said Taiwan as a country. That's all it said. And we couldn't put that in the game, but it is in the Xbox, PC, and Switch versions of the game. So there is a minor difference in the PS4 and PS5 iterations. And we talked a little bit about that.
Weird.
Yeah, so yeah, thank you all out there for your kindness with Sacred Symbols Plus. We're really enjoying doing it. We're going to continue rolling them twice a week, and that'll allow us to explore different topics at hand. I have some exciting ones coming up, including one with a Ukrainian gamer. So we did one with a Russian gamer. I said it felt a little weird to ask anyone in Ukraine not to come talk to us about video games, but we've had some takers nonetheless. And so we're going to do that. I am working on getting some people. Chris, I saw you talking on Twitter about how stupid it is that we still talk about Gamergate, and I totally agree. And so I'm having someone from the political world on to talk about the cross-section of games and politics as far as Gamergate is this inflection point and what it means to people outside of gaming as well, because it's just so stupid. Kotaku wrote that trash.
It's always Kotaku. It never isn't Kotaku is the thing. It's like it's always them. It's like they keep because they know it's a strong search term somehow still. Like I don't. It's so disappointing. It's kind of hypocritical for me to say this because we are no doubt discovered in search terms on iTunes, Google, whatever. But I think it says something about your product and your entire method if you're relying on SEO still and you're not a farm. You shouldn't be writing pieces because people are going to find it on Google, and you're totally right. Because I worked at a website and I know what that's like. That article was bad. All right. Let's see. Oh, Dustin, you have something to say because you're going to be. This is kind of coming in hot, so only people that listen to this on Patreon are going to even know. But right, I'm gonna make a post on Facebook as well, and I posted this on Twitter. So I'm trying to get the word out because we just finalized the details on this just the other day. But Ben and I will be at Too Many Games. It's a convention in the Philadelphia area. I think it's at the Greater Philadelphia Expo Center. And so we will be hanging out there. We don't have anything official going on at the convention, but if you see us there, please come up and say hello. We would love that. But we thought since we're there, let's do a Last Stand community meetup. And so the details on that will be this Saturday, June 25th, and we're doing it at Bald Birds Brewing, which is about a 9-minute drive from the convention center, not too far. It's from 7 to 10 p.m. You don't need a convention pass to come. You can just pull up, hang out, and the
The rest of the team will not be there. It'll be just Ben and I. Dagan is a maybe. And I think that adds a little mystery to it. Will Dagan be there?
Dagan is an ethereal,
right,
ghost-like creature. I don't know. Maybe. Like, I was surprised last weekend. Because my brother, for people that don't know, Dagan, I do knockback with him every week, but he's an animator. I think he's working on a Nickelodeon contract right now. I could be wrong. But he works from home, and he is a complete workaholic and just kind of an insane person. And it really infringes on your ability to get him to do or commit to much of anything. And I was surprised to learn last weekend that he not only, like, my mom and one of my sisters went there to see him or whatever, and then he went to New Jersey to our beach house. I was like, what is it? And now he's going to too many games. I'm like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Cool it. So
we got a good maybe from Dagan. So we'll see. But the last thing I just want to emphasize is that this is low key. So if you come up to me at this thing and say you drove 3 hours, I'm going to kick you out, which is not really possible because it's not my business, but I'm going to try to anyway. Don't go crazy. This is just meant to be fun. But I can't stop you, but low key hang out at Bald Birds Brewing in Philadelphia this weekend. I'll make posts out. Sorry for the free feed listeners, just because, like I said, this has come together very quickly.
Everybody lie to Dustin when you get there. Everybody's like, I drove 10 minutes to see you, even no matter how far you drove. Everybody should just unanimously agree. We all drove 10 minutes exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. Excuse me. Jeez. Cool. We'll have fun and stay safe out there. Pistolvania, where the shooters is, as Wiz Khalifa would say.
Oh,
I think you got to stay strapped. Any given minute, you can take that long nap. All right. Few topics of discussion. Ivory State wrote in and said, "Hey, SS crew. I don't know if you should be calling us that.
Yeah, don't do that.
I don't like that.
I'm sorry, but I have to issue a stand down order to Chris from last episode. You don't have to like sports to appreciate Rocky as a film. It's an emotional underdog story that even someone who knows nothing about boxing or combat sports at all can enjoy. Saying you don't like Rocky because you don't like sports is the same as saying you don't like Apocalypse Now because you don't like war. They both transcend their surface level genre to become an excellent general film experience." It's interesting. What do you think about that? Some people did take umbrage with this.
Yeah, I know. People love Rocky. I get it. It's punching. I think to me, it's just like, I think there's too much cultural osmosis with Rocky. For the same reason, I feel like there was just too much cultural osmosis with Star Wars for a while that really prevented me from getting into it, and still has, quite honestly. Where, like, a lot of the value of Star Wars, especially like the people who originally saw it because it was a new experience. It was like a novel experience. It's like, oh, how cool, how new, how interesting. Whereas, like, my introduction to it was through parody and like satire and just like completely just it being an unavoidable part of like growing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. It was just every fucking where, to the point where like I knew the plot of Star Wars before I had even seen it. Like, because I'd seen, I don't know, some Family Guy thing or some
That's
like,
exactly what I was thinking of.
Or Spaceballs or I listened to that Weird Al Saga Begins American Pie song.
Oh,
like,
Yoda.
Oh. Yeah. Or yeah, exactly. Like I know everything about Star Wars without having seen it. So when I see it, I'm just left underwhelmed because it's kind of not as entertaining as the nonsense versions of it. You know, like it's almost played too seriously. And Rocky was another one of those things where it's like growing up, everybody did like the Adrian. And I'm like, I get the like the steps and Ivan Drago, and like I know all the beats. I know everything. I know about like how he loses. I know like all of it.
What's crazy is that Ivan is like in the fourth one.
I know.
So, like, it all melds, and I agree with you because it all melds in the one movie. I think you got like the kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
You have some Apollo Creed, you know, in there, but Mr. T from the third one, definitely part of it. Drago from the fourth one, and then the mental undoing of Rocky, which is what the fifth one's about. I feel like it all melds into one meme.
Right, it does because it's just. I mean, what can you do with boxing? It's a limited scope of that movie. Not that that's like a problem. I mean, like it's supposed to be what it is. But every time I try to sit down and watch a movie like Rocky, that's been such a cultural touchstone, I get so bored because I see everything that's going to happen, and I just know what's going to happen. And I just don't feel I don't feel like I like the sports angle enough for it to pull me through to the actual cinematic experience of it. I understand it's like a dumb thing. It's like my brain does it. And quite frankly, I think war is kind of cool in fiction. Like, I don't know about,
totally.
I don't know if that's it. Like, I don't think like boxing in fiction is way less interesting than boxing in real life. And I feel like fictional war is almost like the opposite, where it's like, ooh, how cool. You can do like fucking anything and it's not real, so it doesn't matter. But I don't know. Rocky's fine.
Fair enough.
I haven't seen Creed though, which I heard was pretty good.
I haven't either. I've only there's a few Rocky like spinoffs that I've not seen, because isn't there a new one called Rocky?
It's Rocky Balboa.
Rocky Balboa. Yeah, I never saw that.
It's Rocky 2016.
Rocky 20. That's exactly right. Ninja Turtles 1990. Okay. Chris Schaefer wrote in and said, "Dear Colin, I come in a time of great need." He says, "For your son, Chris Raygun has tempted fate in promising an OnlyFans if his YouTube channel reaches 1 million subs by the end of the year. I ask for you to call on your hundreds of millions of fans to subscribe to your boy's channel so that tens of people who want this can be satiated." Are you really going to do this? Well, because I wanted to bring this up because you can make an OnlyFans and not do anything with it. You know?
Right. That's not what you said in the video, Chris, though.
That is not what I said in the video. Oh, okay, but I choose my words very carefully. I'll just have you all know. I choose my words very carefully. I want you to listen very closely. And then go ahead, subscribe. Go ahead, do it. Boost my negotiation power with ad companies. Go ahead. I dare you.
Yeah, I mean, that's good stuff. I'm the exact opposite on YouTube, though. I think it frustrates Dustin and Ben because I want our numbers to I like the comparison of, like, Sacred Symbols is getting bigger. So our numbers are getting more and more impressive compared to our subscriber numbers, which grow way slower than the show's numbers are growing. Yeah. And I kind of like that. I don't know. I think I see some of these channels with like 500,000 subscribers and they get half our numbers. And I'm like, I don't want to be that. I would rather you not subscribe at all unless you're positive you're going to watch the stuff. That's as true, weird as that is.
No, I know what you mean. Like I think I've publicly said, like, I don't know if it was in videos or on Twitter or like somewhere, but like I remember saying, like, yeah, I would if there was a button to like purge like dead subscribers, I would press it. I would press it. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if it like makes my subscriber count like 100K or something, because that would just make the views more impressive.
Yeah, and wouldn't you want to know? I mean, I feel the same way on Twitter.
I would want.
I would do the same thing on Twitter. I have 165,000 people, or whatever. If I lost half of them, that's fine, because then it's just they're not there anyway. So it's like,
exactly. Like I've been on YouTube for like my channel has existed on YouTube since 2007. I have about 660 something thousand subscribers. I would wager at least like 5,000 of you are dead.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Just statistically, I know it's morbid, but like, I mean, surely a sizable enough number of you guys have fucking kicked the bucket doing some bullshit. So, so like, I don't know. I would like to have like a more accurate subscriber count rather than just this inflated, inaccurate number. Like, I don't, and my channel still does pretty well, surprisingly, despite the fact that I post so irregularly. It's kind of surprising. But, if it did as well as it does, and I had like 10,000 subscribers, that's crazy cool. Like, that's almost like a badge of honor. It's like, oh, fuck.
Definitely.
This dude's blasting through the ceiling.
That's why we're almost at a 50% basically with the biggest episodes of Sacred, like getting up to 40,000, which is like half of our subscriber. I'm like, that's good to me. Yeah. I would rather that than look weird. And we all know about these channels that look a little weird, right?
Oh yeah.
Like the Dying Husk of G4, when I go over there, they have all of these subscribers and just no views. And I'm like, that's not good. Mm-hmm. Not a good look, my friends. All right. Well, OnlyFans, can't wait to see Chris's dong on OnlyFans. Should I be saying that? I don't know.
I don't know, man. You're canonically my dad, I think. So
I know.
It's a little weird.
Well, it's getting a little weird. I'm Italian, so the Romans were getting a little weird back in the day.
Wow.
It's true. All right, Dustin, you're not going to escape. Zachary Parkerson wrote in.
Oh, I'm ready for this one.
Said, Sacred Boys, I hereby propose Dustin is no longer allowed to give Colin shit for his crippling trophy compulsions. Dustin can't let a single game be named without wondering or talking about all of its technical aspects. Nary a game is mentioned without Dustin piping in about its frame rate or its fidelity. Dustin has his own compulsive shit to work through as well. And as we all know, I'm sorry, those in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. It's a good thing Chris is there to keep level slit of heads. Good day, gentlemen. Zachary Parkerson coming in hot. You know, Chris seems to take some umbrage here.
I think I have an issue with this. I think I have an issue with this only because I feel like I'm a little bit more harsh on frame rates and fidelity, specifically frame rates, than probably anybody. You know,
Zachary has it out for Dustin then.
Yeah, I feels like it because I specifically will not. If something runs like sub 30, like 29, I probably won't play it at all. Like,
yeah,
you know, like I feel like Dustin's a lot more forgiving of that stuff. He just mentions it.
Right. Well, and okay, the honest answer is one of the reasons I do that is that it's one of the areas I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable about and I do extensive research about for the show. So it's been able to provide context. But since Zachary's coming in here hot, trying to compare this to some kind of trophy mental illness, here's the thing, okay, with frame rates and stuff like that, is that, for example, I'm going to talk about I played the Resident Evil HD, the GameCube one that they ported to PS4.
I saw that you played that. That's interesting. Yeah.
So I booted it up and realized that it was 30 FPS. And guess what? That annoyed me a little bit because it's such an old game, but I thought it's not a big deal. The main time that I have really given Colin shit for trophies is when he refuses to play games based on it having a platinum or not. I feel like that's more extreme. Just me. Teach their own. And you know what? Maybe this question did provide some valuable context that people enjoy different aspects of games. To me, when a game has great fidelity and great performance, this pleases me. This adds to the enjoyment for me greatly. And I've listed out the reasons why many times before on this show. But for me, that's one of the things. But for others, it may be that trophy pop. And so I will conclude by saying once again, teach their own.
Well, that's interesting. No, you are saying to each their own, but I think his whole contention is that I'm a little more laissez-faire than you, right? Like I'm not out here fucking throwing stones at anyone. I'm the one who keeps saying that there's no right way to play games. People always tell me you're not playing the game right. I'm like, well, so I understand what you're saying, but I feel like you're a little more judgy, and that's fine. That's totally fine. I'm playing. I'll talk about it when we get to what we're playing, but I'm 100%ing a game on N64 right now, and it's driving me insane. Just because I'm not earning any trophies. Like, it's like I wrote in the trophy channel on Discord, I feel like I'm wasting all of my time right now. Just because I'm not, I'm like, not only am I just playing a game, I am balls deep in this game, you know? So just like, there'll be no proof that this ever happened. And that bothers me.
But you are the proof. Like, it's all that matters is that you played it.
I understand that, but you know what has brought trophies that brought to mind, Chris, for me more than anything, and maybe I brought this up in the past, is that I have no doubt so many motherfuckers were lying about games back in the day.
For
what
sure.
They were playing, about what they were beating. Just based on trophies now and how many people play games and then get through to the end, it's like, oh, I would love to know how many of you actually beat some of these games.
Yeah.
Sons of bitches. No, but you can't get away with that anymore. That's what I love. There was a guy at IGN when I first started working there. They got fired for lying about how much he played a game for review because they could prove it with the trophy. Or it was actually not trophies, it was achievements. So I like that kind of stuff. Also, I think someone from GameSpot got fired for playing an MMO for like an hour and then writing a review, not thinking that they could just see that.
Oh my God.
Look that up. That's probably a 15-year-old story at this point. All right. What else is going on? Oh, I wanted to ask you guys this. This comes from Miles Varales. By Odin's Fade, do you guys say Reese's Pieces or Reese's Pieces? I fucking hate it. And I know exactly. We all know what he's talking about.
Yes.
Right.
And I've never wanted to murder a person more than when they say Reese's Pieces. How do you get Reese's without an I? It's Reese's. Reese.
Yeah, it's Reese's. It's Pieces of Reese. And it's
what
very
piece
clear.
We don't know.
Yeah, we don't know. It could be anything. But Reese is a big boy, I guess. Because
Well, it's multiples of his pieces. It indicates it's all of them, but just
right.
various.
Yeah.
It's pieces he created, not pieces of him. Hopefully,
let's hope not. But
Right, possessive but plural. Yeah.
But the idea is like you have to actively fuck the word pieces. You know what I mean? You have to actively like contort and Frankenstein the word pieces into being a fake word just so you can pronounce Reese's wrong. Whereas like Reese is a name and pieces is a word. And they rhyme for that reason. So clear. Like I've met people who say this and I don't say anything because I'm a kind person. Right. But, you know, I'm thinking like death upon you.
Yeah, totally.
You know, it's a very stressful thing to hear. Disconcerting.
I couldn't tell you any better than that. Dustin, please. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think this is a rare moment where not only are we all in agreement, we're all extremely passionate about this. And it's funny you brought this up, Colin, because I was at Dairy Queen probably about 2 weeks ago, and the woman in front of me ordered a Blizzard with Reese's Pieces. And I felt it throughout my whole body, that moment when I heard it. And it had been a while, but I was like, man, a wild sighting or hearing of this. And it just, I was so enraged when we left. I talked to Holly about it and I told her, I was like, this made me very angry to hear it. How can people say this? And so I'm really happy that it's being brought to light on the show.
I have this, I think a lot of people do, you know, I talk to my dog in like a certain voice and it sounds like something that
the Southern voice.
Yeah. And it sounds like something that like a made up language would include. You know, when you incorporate like words and you just make things up and you have like a little special language with someone or whatever, an accent. Reese's Pieces. I couldn't say it any better than Chris did, just because it already rhymes. You don't have to say it a different way and then make those two words fake and rhyme with each other. Yeah. It's really it's just flagrant in how ridiculous it is.
It's narcissism is what it is. It's entirely narcissistic because it's like, look at how unique I am. Look at the way that I say this thing that you've been saying correctly the whole time, but it's my own little way. Fuck you.
Yeah, get fucked.
Get fucked. Get out of here.
All right. Let's get into some smaller news items here. I want to start with this. I'm a little salty. Actually, I'm moderately salty about something, and I want to just bring it up here. I don't want to make a big deal out of it. No one say anything to this person or do anything. I just want to put it out there. Everyone who listens to Sacred Symbols knows that months ago, I broke the story that 2K picked up a Google Stadia game from Supermassive, and then I was the one who told you later that game was the Quarry. Right? Everyone who listens to this show knows that.
Yeah.
I bring this up because Axios, Stephen Totillo at Axios, wrote a story breaking this news about the Quarry. And that just really got my goat because it's just bullshit. I don't like not getting cited for things. Here's why. Because people are so excited to tell me when I get things wrong. That's fine. That's your right to do that. You can't steal the things from me that I got right. You know? So I go to the Quarry's Wikipedia page. And it's cited. The Axios story cited there. And I'm like, oh, you stole one from me. One got by the goalie. And I just needed to point it out. I don't like it. Bothers me. Do I think it's Stephen Totillo's fault? Well, Stephen Totillo and I don't really get along very well. I did invite him on the show recently. He said no. But he was the editor-in-chief, Chris, when all those hit pieces were written about us. Remember they reached out to me in quotes?
Yeah.
And they for a comment, but I'd never heard a word from them. So I'm not trying to make it personal from that point of view and from like his whatever. It's just I was a journalist for a long time, and when I learned through different ways that a story had been broken before or whatever, you always source that story, even if you have more to say about it, as originally written by, as originally broken by. See, I just know that when I get things wrong, people like to beat the shit out of me about it. That's totally I put myself out there, so that's fine, but this one was taken from me. And I was only happy to see on Push Square and some other websites, people with comments saying, oh, this is not news. This is not news. But so, like I said, at the very beginning, everyone's like, Colin, why are you going on in this diatribe? You sound so salty. Did I not say at the beginning that I was, in fact, moderately salty about it?
Yeah, I would be salty about it.
So I just wanted to put that out there. Sacred Symbols is proud to be sponsored by BetterHelp, and our listeners get 10% off their first month of online therapy sessions at betterhelp.com/symbols. So we all deal with mental fatigue. A lot of us simply call it burnout, and sadly, it's a fact of life. But like with so many things, you have to show initiative to heal what ails you. And in this regard, in this nebulous, burned out space we all find ourselves in from time to time, marked by a lack of motivation or irritability or a general feeling of fatigue, the sooner you get that anchor detached from your neck, the better off you're going to be. And this is where my friends at BetterHelp come into play. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. This customized, tailored approach is key, and what makes BetterHelp stand apart. It's 2022, not 1972, and so we no longer have to drive or take public transit to an office, sit in a waiting room, speak to someone face-to-face, and pay an arm and a leg for the honor. Instead, you can get qualified therapeutic help from your phone, your webcam, or even in merely exchanging messages. When you think about it, there truly isn't a single good reason therapy would work only in person. I truly believe in the efficacy of therapy. It's been useful at various times of my now decidedly middle-aged life, and the prospect of people using BetterHelp to easily access the mental health care they need is, well, gratifying. Because we all need to accept that help sometimes. That's called being human. And if it makes it easier to convince yourself this is the right step, you'll also be pleased to learn that BetterHelp is much more affordable than in-person therapy, and they move fast too. Once you sign up, they'll match you with a therapist in 48 hours or less. My friends, you hold the keys to your own future. You need to stride through the door, reach out a hand, and take the figurative walk to a brighter future. And BetterHelp can, well, help. It's that simple. To begin your journey towards better mental health, to throw off the shackles of the dreaded burnout and regain your life in its fittest form, try online therapy at betterhelp.com/symbols. That's BetterHelp.com/SYMBOLS. BetterHelp awaits, ready to help you tackle your innermost issues at betterhelp.com/symbols. Guys, it's being reported that PlayStation won't be at Gamescom. And Alex Cunningham wrote in, long lost brother of Richie Cunningham, says, "My right honorable gentleman, with the news confirmed that Sony will not be attending Gamescom, a surprise to nobody, a lack of gameplay trailers for upcoming first-party titles like God of War and The Last of Us Part 1, and generally a quiet front on the first-party studios and what they are developing front, do you think a larger-scale PlayStation event is likely soon in the cards? And if so, what do you predict we'll see there? Keep up the good work, and often ridiculed Brit." All right, so I wanted to bring this in at the same time, guys, that Sony is having its own event. It's important to remember in the grand scheme of things. We interchange Sony and PlayStation all the time, but Sony is its own corporation. PlayStation's actually its own subsidiary corporation that Sony owns. So Sony itself is doing an event June 28th. And this event apparently is going to be hardware focused, and apparently there will be some PlayStation stuff there. Not the controller, but apparently headsets and monitors. So we'll keep an eye on all of that, but apparently this is not going to be a games event. And as of the time we're recording, we have no word on if there will be another state of play, a first or second party state of play like we thought might be coming. I wanted to present all that information before we get into it. Chris, Sony won't be at Gamescom. Not a huge surprise. Sony is having a hardware event, Sony proper, later this month. We don't really know very much about what's going on past The Last of Us Part 1. God of War still doesn't have a release date. And then beyond that, there are only a few games that we really know about. Spider-Man 2 and Wolverine. Mm-hmm. And then some second-party games like Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Part 2. So I'm wondering, what are we expecting? The silence is becoming more and more pronounced, I think. And it's quite, I keep saying I like how they're just pushing it because I think it just makes it more exciting. But I'm wondering where you sit this week on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bizarre. Like, I don't know how much hardware, like it's a hardware focused event, right? And apparently, like, what is it? Monitors and headsets. That seems like a strange. That seems like a space that's ripe for a surprise. You know, I don't want to get like too, conspiratorial or anything, but like that seems like a perfect place to kind of drop something shocking and surprising. Not games wise, obviously, but like I think hardware wise, I think it could be a cool opportunity to maybe show off PSVR 2. I think it could be a neat idea to maybe like get in with, like, if that Pro controller isn't there, that's a weird missed opportunity. But the fact that there isn't a proper state of play slated at all for anytime soon is a little bit worrying. Not necessarily from like I wonder what's going on standpoint, but definitely just from hey, you've been silent for a bit long. And everybody's kind of speaking right now. This is kind of the time to speak. Maybe they're waiting for things to die down a little bit. But without E3, and this is kind of the problem. This is why I liked E3, is like it was a very specific time. You know, you had like a couple days in June and that was it. It wasn't like this whole, now the whole summer is just a full of just random shit. And you're going to have to like guess which ones are going to be worth your time or not. So I feel like it's not going to really die down until probably early August. You're probably going to have a bunch of weird presentations for a while. So to me, you know, I would want to, if I was trying to separate myself from that chaff, maybe I'd go later, but I certainly would say that at least, you know, I would certainly announce something for later, at least, just to get the ball rolling, especially because God of War has been in the news cycle constantly in this not exactly unflattering way, but not particularly positive way of just like wondering where the hell this game is, wondering how far along it is, wondering whether or not it's been delayed or not. I think some clarity would be good.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just wondering what's kind of going on here. I just feel like it's a little strange that they're being so quiet about that specific game. I don't so much mind the future stuff, but they're really keeping it close to the chest. I want to point out, though, as far as Gamescom is concerned, that we have to remember a lot of developers are in complete turmoil right now. That's too strong a word. Everything's kind of roiled right now, right? With the pandemic and working from home and kind of getting everyone back together and getting these games out. The last thing any of these studios have the time for is to make a demo and then send it to Gamescom. That yeah. I can promise you. They have no interest, any of these studios, and Sony wisely is not going to go to their first and second party teams and be like, I need you guys all to stop for 3 weeks. Let's get this vertical slice and polish this bad boy up and send it to Gamescom. It's just not that important anymore. And I think Sony is looking at this, though the silence is frustrating, Dustin, and saying, we don't really need to do anything. We're still selling all of these games and all these consoles. Why would we do more than we have to do? And I think it's a reasonable question. So the Gamescom thing doesn't surprise me so much as the silence around God of War, which I think is still, like, I believe it's going to come out this year. I do, but I feel like there is worry that maybe internally, maybe up until this point, maybe until recently, where it might not have made it.
Right. So, Colin, I wanted to bring up this hardware event because in the doc you wrote probably nothing interesting, but I think that there could be some interesting tips on what we can expect in the future from Sony. So specifically, the biggest leak about this event is from Tom Henderson, and he wrote up an article on exputer.com that's about, like, there's 3 different types of headsets. Whatever, the headsets aren't that exciting to me. The monitors are more interesting, just in that they're branding these with exclusive features for PlayStation. At least that's what this article says. And so he writes, according to my sources, one of these monitors will be for 4K gaming at 144 hertz, whereas the others will be full HD at 240 hertz. Both devices will be described as being, quote, perfect for PS5 and have VRR and a bunch of other features. They also have like gaming assist features where you can like put the FPS counter and stuff like that. So why would Sony be interested in making monitors that are pro level, like 240 hertz? I don't think PlayStation can even support that right now. And so
that ties into what Tom says about a PS5 Pro and all of the rest as well.
Right. But I'm wondering, I think more so in that these monitors are a product for Sony's new emphasis on esports and Evo, where even if a game is not being played on PlayStation, that they can at least have all of their monitors be up on screen. Or maybe this is a look at Sony implementing new features into PlayStation in order to make it a device that theoretically could be more appealing to esports and pro players, even though I don't think it will work. But some like 240 hertz at 1080p, that would be kind of an interesting feature for Call of Duty players, or something like that. So And the other thing too with these monitors is just that PlayStation still doesn't have 1440p support, but they said it was coming. So maybe that's in the cards as well. I'm just wondering, even though the hardware is kind of feels outside the bubble in some ways of PlayStation, that maybe this hardware could be looking towards a more esports focused Sony. And who knows, maybe that involves this esports or this FPS game that's being developed at Guerrilla, whether that's SOCOM or something else. But clearly they're very interested in that space.
Yeah. Interesting insight there. I feel like there's a third component to this, because we've talked about, the what Chris had to say and what you had to say. And I think there's just one third thing I want to bring in here, which is this weird, I don't know if it's a game of telephone or what's happening between some of these kind of well-known or becoming well-known leakers and insiders. But I don't know if you saw it, Dustin. There was like some indication that Sony is making a handheld. Did you?
I saw that.
Did you see this? And I don't
image.
know. I don't even know what I really should say. Like I've heard things get R&D'd all the time. And this was years ago after Vita was released or whatever, that they were interested in another Vita thing. And then things got cracked. Like we know 2016, I think, was the year that everything changed for Vita, because that was when Vita basically became irreparably hacked, and in a way that they just couldn't kind of keep up with anymore. And so they were trying to just shut it down as a vector, as we've said in the past, of attack and all of that. But what did you think of that, Dustin? It's basically like an inclination that they might be making something. Someone points to like is that a Steam Deck running PlayStation? I mean, the image of it or whatever.
No, that's not a Steam Deck. I don't have the image.
Like, what is
handy.
that? What is that image?
Right. That's the question, is that
it's running PlayStation 4, it looks like, on the screen.
I thought, do you have the image up? Can you put it in the chat just so I can?
Yeah, I'm going to
I saw it earlier this morning, but there's a lot of theories about what Sony could do with a handheld now, because it's clear that
here it is.
The market, at least in terms of Nintendo Switch and both Steam Deck, is that people like this hybrid nature. Now, Steam Deck isn't necessarily a hybrid, but the idea is that you buy games on Steam and you can play them on your PC, and then your saves are in the cloud and you can then play them on your deck. So it's like this hybrid style approach. And so this image here, that I think
what
that
is
UI,
that
UI is the PS5 UI.
Yeah. So what is that? What is that?
There was a couple people that were trying to like chime in and be like, oh, this is this render. And it's like, no, it's not. But no one, usually when things like this happen, a follow-up tweet will be like, oh, this is this fan render or whatever. And no one that I can tell has done that.
Well, all right. So just to kind of clue everyone in on what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah.
A guy named Zone of Tech, I don't know who that is, tweeted out an image saying, stay tuned, with the eyeball emoji thing, And then there's a picture of what seems to be a corner of what potentially could be some sort of playable, I don't know, Switch-like PS5, I guess. It could just be a render. But then what's interesting about it is that someone tweets and asks the snitch, Insider WTF, who is the guy who's leaking everything recently, who I think has given himself up as being German, by the way, in some of the stuff he's been sharing. I don't know if he was intentionally doing that or not. That's why when people were like, it says he lives in Miami, I'm like, no, he doesn't. He doesn't speak. He's not typing like he's a native English speaker. But he says in response to the inquiry, if this is real, he says, Sony Showcase won't show anything related to that. I don't know. I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but what the fuck is that? I just don't know what that is. And it just seems to me impossible that they could have. Look how big the PS5 is.
Yeah.
Like what is this? We're going to talk about a slim PS5 in a little while, but I don't know. I'm surprised, like you said, that this hasn't been, and maybe it has been some corner I haven't seen yet of someone saying like, what is, this is fake, or this is this, or this is that. Dustin, you have something more to say.
Right. Well, I mean, there's possibilities that maybe, so if it plays PS5 games, maybe it's streaming PS5 games to the device. And that's kind of the angle that it's going for. Maybe it would be interesting to see Sony do something that's like, okay, developers, if your game can run on this lower grade hardware, then you can verify it for whatever this PlayStation portable device is. And so you can kind of have that cross-save hybrid nature that you would get from a deck or a Switch or something like that. I don't know. I'm looking at this I found the direct tweet of this Zone of Tech guy, and I'm trying to find any other info from it, but I don't know. It's very, very intriguing. Like we said before, there's something with handhelds right now. The Steam Deck just continually is impressing more people. People are desperate to get their hands on them. They're very, very hard to get because Valve is just shipping them out as quickly as they can, but there's so many pre-ordered that it would be crazy to ignore this space completely. And it's like, I know they have their VR vertical, but maybe there's something that they can do that's somewhere in the middle, like a streaming thing that plays lower tier or lower whatever games that don't require as much processing.
Understand that if they make a portable PlayStation again, I'm gonna shit my pants. Like, straight up. I play Vita all the time, and I want that back again. The Steam Deck is. You brought yours to my house, so I got to like hold it and mess with it, and it's too big. But I feel the same way about Switch. I'm playing Switch recently, and I'll get into what I'm playing in a little while. But I was playing it first handheld, and I'm like, God, this is so cumbersome. And so I see this render. Could it be real? I probably not. But just seeing that form factor, I'm like, maybe that's a little bit of a turnoff. But what are you supposed to do? You know, I mean, these things need their components and whatnot.
Yeah. I'm going to reverse image search this on Google. Surely someone's already done this, but
I've reached out to a friend of mine too that might know more to see what he has to say about it too. Yeah. So I'll keep an eye out to see if he responds. All right, let's move on. A Plague Tale Requiem, the sequel to A Plague Tale, has a release date. Let's see here. Yes, there it is. October 18th.
Nice.
Chris, I was curious what you thought about this. You liked Plague Tale, right?
I enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yeah.
More than I thought I would, because I'm not usually into those very narrative heavy games. But I was pleasantly surprised that it was just it's a stealth game that like plays with light and shadow, and it's like just a very neat. It was just like a genuinely neat game to play. I thought it was like paced exceptionally well, just the way that it weaved different game mechanics into each other. It was pretty damn enjoyable for a game from a studio that I was just relatively unfamiliar with. So I'm definitely looking forward to this. I think October is like a perfect time for a game like this, just purely because of like the aesthetic and the style. I think it fits with that gothic kind of like, ooh, Halloween's coming up kind of feel. So that's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. It's nice to have a release date that doesn't feel like it's going to be pushed. Like I believe this, you know. I don't feel like it's one of those things where it's like, oh, just kidding. We'll see you in 2023 because the rats don't look quite right. You know, it's. I believe that release date.
Yeah, it's the time to release it. Of course, A Plague Tale: Innocence came to PS4 in 2019. I think it was ported to PS5 in 2021. Focus Home Interactive, which is now known as Focus Entertainment, is the publisher. And you had said you'd never heard of Asobo. No one would have really known much about Asobo. They were a licensed team out of France. They did some support work, and A Plague Tale was really the first game of any consequence they did. Although they were founded a long time ago, like 20 years ago. So they finally made it, and we'll be interested in seeing that. Dustin, do you have anything to add about this?
No, I'm looking forward to it. I think that the first one was very good, had some issues, and so it's like the perfect opportunity for like a sequel glow up for a game that was already really good. So they're just a weird team to me that they do Microsoft Flight Simulator and this. It's like two very different things. It's neat.
Yeah, it's such a wide disparity between those two genres. It's lunacy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess that is true that they should deserve credit for that because they weren't always the team that did that, but I think it was only this one, right? That they
I think so. Over. I don't think they did previous ones.
It's funny, man. I watch LGR. I like that guy, LGR on YouTube.
Dude, that guy is awesome.
And he's always going into some of these. I don't know anything about PC gaming really compared to most people that are in the space, and I like some of the flight sim stuff he's done and some other people have done because it's such a cool game. It's just I just can't do it. Yeah,
it's very specific.
Yeah,
you know, it's very cool and it's very well done, but it's also like I can't. They almost kind of got me with that pelican, where I was like, "Ooh, you could fly a pelican."
Oh yeah,
but
that was cool.
I still didn't. It was, I think I looked at the download file and it's like 2 million gigs, and I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. I'll see it later, maybe.
All right. I want to know what you guys think of this next one. This just broke right before we started recording.
Yeah.
But there's a new studio that's formed called Lithos. But they're making a game called Ashfall. It's a Web3 game that will include NFTs. And here's where it gets fucking weird, in my opinion. It's a collaboration between John Garvin and Michael Mumbauer. Now, John Garvin's probably a more familiar name to most people. John Garvin is what was one of the big people at Sony Ben for a long time, the writer and creator of games like Siphon Filter. And he left right after Days Gone came out under bad circumstances. There was basically a power struggle at Ben's studio. We go into it on Sacred Symbols Plus with Jeff Ross about the struggle. I think Christopher Reesees was the guy that I think won out. So John Garvin's kind of been a free agent for a couple of years. Michael Mumbauer. People might know Michael Mumbauer. You might know that name if you see a lot of credits. He was the head of Sony's visual arts group for quite a while. And this is kind of like an internal team. This is kind of part of the team that was rumored to be working on that Uncharted game and was originally doing the Last of Us remake before Naughty Dog took it back and all of that. So apparently he's left. They've created this new studio called Lithos. It's Liithos if you guys want to check it out. They're making a game called Ashfall. I think it's kind of funny. I'm looking at VentureBeat. They have a story about it. Others do as well. They have some screenshots and not screenshots, development concept art. I'm like, oh my God, this is just.
Do you see the image of them?
Yeah, and then there's images of them
in the chat.
Yeah, they're funny. Yeah, here I'll well, people can look at it if they want. There's like these great, these very professional photos of them being taken, but I don't know. I chase the money
a
and
bit
do
extra. These photos.
They are. They definitely are. And I love John Garvin, so seeing him like in that picture is so interesting. We'll get him on. I'm going to write this down actually. I'll see if I'll reach out to him again, see if he wants to talk. The last time I spoke to him, he didn't want to talk because he was in the middle of doing something. I guess this was it. However, the more interesting thing is, and I don't know if you guys saw this, is that Michael Mumbauer had actually an interstitial period, and I don't think I realized this, where he had already left Sony and went to That's No Moon. Do you remember that? We were making fun of that studio's name. I'm like, Jesus Christ. And so he founded that studio apparently and then left. So not a good sign for them. Very similar to what happened with Haven. Remember when one of the guys that founded Haven just left like 6 months or a year in before the Sony acquisition. So he missed all that money. So anyway, I wanted to just throw that out there, that there's like a series of people kind of coming together to make this, and they're calling it quote unquote a true Web3 AAA title. It will debut on PC consoles and something called the Hedera network, which is a blockchain-like technology. So yeah, strange times. Dustin, let's go to you first. What do you think? Web3 game with John Garvin writing and I guess helping to produce the world and the characters, the lore, which he's great at. But this game, Ashfall, it looks cool. There's no doubt. This looks like Resistance, actually, kind of. Like maybe Resistance meets Killzone if you look at the palette, the color palette with the oranges and such. There's this shot of the guy like walking through with his cape on, walking with the mountain in the background or the volcano in the background. It looks like Killzone to me.
That looks like Destiny concept art, like straight up. Like that looks like a hunter from Destiny. Like maybe it's just the hood, but so here's the main thing that I'm just shocked by in this is that we've seen the quote unquote rise and already fall of NFTs, if you even want to call it a rise. Like that whole, at least to me, from my impression of seeing people talk about it online, it's like it kind of seems like the jig is up. Like people are not into this idea outside of there's some whales that have bought them and then either lost all their money or it's been stolen or something like that. And so to come out in June of 2022 and say you're a new studio making an NFT project is bold, because instantly there was like negative reaction. Our own Discord was like, what the fuck? What are you thinking doing this? And so it's one of those things where I feel like any developer that is announcing NFT stuff right now, first of all, it's like, man, they know the pushback, but the only thing that I can think is that maybe in their heads they're thinking, well, we're going to be the ones to get it right, or we're the ones that are going to change people's minds. And it's like, you're just starting development on this game. Like, when will the NFTs be taken out in the next year and a half, 2 years? Like, at some point, it's probably going to happen, just because if it's still there at launch, I mean, I don't know. Maybe in the next 2 years, something will change and magically everyone's suddenly like, yeah, I want to buy digital goods, like JPEGs or whatever. And suddenly that makes sense in their mind. I just don't really see that happening. So bold move. Maybe there's something I don't understand about it, but I'm willing to give them a chance and see what they'll do. But I'm personally not interested in any NFT related aspect of it.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll just say that I've softened on crypto over the last couple of years, perhaps.
Sure.
People that listen to Fireside Chats, my old podcast back in the day, will remember I did a whole show with someone at a firm called The Library, LBRY, that was like way into blockchain stuff, and he was trying to explain it to me, and I didn't really get it, and I still don't really get it entirely.
Yeah.
However, what I will say is that while it's Bitcoin and all these things I don't think are the future, I think something like that has more conceivable use and utility. And what convinced me strangely of this was when Canada started freezing people's bank accounts. As weird as it is, during the trucker protests that happened, I think that was last year, when they started just going after people by freezing their bank accounts. I'm like, oh, no. And that was when my mind opened to this idea of decentralized currency. NFTs, to me, seem like just nonsensical. Like, no matter how you spin it or explain it, you're never going to convince me that is valuable. I just commissioned a painting, and I just got it, a second painting from one of my favorite bands, Dredge. Their bassist is a painter, like a fine painter. Yeah. And I commissioned a couple of paintings from him, and it's surrealist art. And it's on a canvas, and he signed it, and it's hanging on my wall. And he took a picture of it, and he's selling prints of it. And that's totally fine. I don't care. He told me he was going to do that. I'm totally fine with it. I own the original. And the original is a physical thing that he painted, not a digital artifact. So that's my problem with NFTs, and why I think I've tried in my mind to be as fair as possible to segment the idea of crypto technology, blockchain technology, and the use of that, and trying to really wrap my mind around it. And I'm still really not smart enough to get it entirely, with this predatory bullshit that your ape JPEG is worth money. And every new technology brings with it things that just fall to the wayside. I don't know anything about cars, for instance, but I'm sure early cars in the 1910s, 1920s had weird shit and weird things that they were like, that doesn't make any sense, and they just get rid of them, right? And then the car is just the car, and it just putters along, and you don't need to worry about that anymore. NFTs feel like that, like a barnacle on an otherwise maybe novel idea. So, Chris, what do you think about this idea of John Garvin going to or co-founding the studio with Michael Mumbauer and creating this generic looking game? Now, generic's a strong word, because I would play that game the way it looks. If that was like a first person shooter or something, or if you told me that was Resistance or Killzone, I'd be like, I'm in. But God almighty, it's totally derivative. I mean, I don't know. So the only thing that's going to differentiate you is this thing that no one wants. And that's troubling.
Right. Yeah. I mean, especially considering we don't really have any idea of what this gameplay actually is going to be, or what it looks like, because it's so fucking early. But I thought the same thing that Dustin thought, whereas like I looked at that, I was like, this looks like Destiny. Like, this looks exactly like that. Even some of the shots that have nothing to do, like, that don't have characters in them. Like, there's this there's this screenshot of like it says, it's underneath in the Venture Beat thing, it says Ash Falls post-apocalyptic world. And I'm looking at it, and it's a bunch of planes crashed in an open field, and it's like, this is literally the Moth Yards in old Russia in Destiny 1. Like, it's literally
Cosmodrome.
It's literally the Cosmodrome. And I'm like, wow, this is so weird to see. But I mean, if that's what they're doing, that's what they're doing. I don't think the NFT aspect of it excites me at all. I would not be surprised, like Dustin said, to see that aspect of the project completely shuttered and thrown out, just to make the game a lot more approachable to the overwhelming majority of people who probably would play the game otherwise. But I'm with you in the sense that I just don't really understand NFTs. I think the best way that I can understand NFTs is that we kind of already unanimously agree that money has arbitrary value.
Right.
You know? And so maybe this is just an example of not everybody, but a sizable enough portion of people agreeing that a JPEG has value, that they're willing to pay for that money. Doesn't mean it actually has value, but at the same time, you could argue that about money also. So I guess that's that's as much sense as I can make out of it. I'm still not going to pay like $2,000 or anything more or less for a JPEG. You know, that's never going to happen. But I think I'm still confused as to what this means for the application of games. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand how, because our understanding of NFTs may be limited because it's just the most ridiculous shit that we see. Because it's the easiest stuff to clown on. It's the stuff that trends on social media. Oh, somebody bought Dune for $3 million and it was just the book. And they thought they had the rights to it.
That's still one of the great stories of all. I mean, I'll never get over how funny that is.
No, it's amazing.
We're going to make derivative works of Dune.
Yeah, it's so stupid.
It was, to be fair, it was an art book. It was like a treatment book for a film. It wasn't for whatever Frank Herbert's novel.
No, I mean, still, like, that's still insane.
Yeah. But it's still insane.
But I guess I don't know how that translates to a video game. Like what that means for video games in any real meaningful way. It's like maybe like you own a skin that nobody has, but like
that's exactly what it is. And here's the thing, Chris, is I mean, that's I think what they're doing. And to me, I'm like, okay, but that's not valuable. Like just because you can do that doesn't mean that your SOCOM fucking skin has value. And that's the weird thing. It's cool that it's yours. Maybe you can sell it, but I think what the problem is that they're not starting from the bottom, right? They're saying like, look at this is going to be valuable and really important instead of saying like, we're going to have this kind of marinating system of guns and skins and all the stuff that you own and claim. And then maybe they'll be valuable if the market conceives that they're valuable, but it takes time. I mean, because you had brought up fiat, or not fiat money, but just money as exchange. That took thousands of years for that to happen. Like from the representation to convince someone like this seashell, this gold coin, it represents the bushel. Do you get it? And you know how long it took for people to fucking glue onto that? Capitalism itself is like is new. It's so I mean it's just so silly. It's like going to the 25th step.
Yeah, it's going to be a hard sell for the overwhelming majority of people, and because it's going to be a hard sell for the majority of people, I just don't see it working really ever. I feel like this is a fool's errand right now to try and get NFTs really, because there's also the aspect of like, okay, let's say there's one skin in the world, right? And you have that one skin. Do you know how many skins you have to make in a game to make that worth it? Do you understand how many permutations of different skins you're going to have to make? Do you understand how much dev time? You understand how limited your ability to make? I mean, the reason they can print so much money is because every piece of money looks the same. Like $1 is $1. You know, it doesn't need to be a unique dollar. Your dollar doesn't have value because it's unique. It has value because it's the exact same dollar that everybody else has. So the idea that like, oh, I have this unique skin, you're going to need billions of unique skins for any of those individual skins to have any fragment of value. It is such a weird concept.
Right, and then what you're saying is perfect. It leads right into this notion, like I was saying, of the painting, the physical painting. How are they going to solve that problem, Chris? AI. Just like they solve that problem with up-resing with AI right now and doing all the things they did at Grand Theft Auto with AI. And
oh, sure. Yeah.
So they're going to use AI. So that's the thing, is that I had a guy paint, right? And then they're going to say this thing that an AI made, that's digital, has value. And this is where the 5th, 6th, 7th steps, they don't make sense. That's why getting to the 25th step, it's like, well, you're never going to get there. So
it's like that AI bot that's been circulating on Twitter lately. That's been like,
so good.
It's really cool because you could be like, oh, George Costanza, or like you could be like a Crash Bandicoot guest starring on Seinfeld. And it just like, and it paints all these scenarios that looks pretty close to what you're trying to, and that's cool. But at the same time, it's like, you can't just type in cool skin, you know, in an algorithm and have it like, even if you leave a lot of that development work of like, oh, different skins, even if you leave all of that or color palette swaps, even if you leave that work to an AI that kind of does it overnight, there's going to be like maybe like 5% of those, maybe less, that are going to be appealing to the human eye.
Sure.
Or like marketable at all. It's very dumb. I wouldn't say it's bold to announce an NFT project now. I would say it's just straight up ignorant. Like I don't know what you're doing. You're going to cut these midway through. You're going to cut these midway through, and then you're going to wind up with a game that has no unique aspects to it. I don't know. This looks like Destiny. Like, I'm sorry. Like I've played Destiny long enough to know that this is Destiny concept art, basically.
What's funny is that it takes place in Seattle, isn't that where Bungie is?
That's where Bungie is, yeah.
You can just tell from all the Sky Needle and
and
what is
the
that Mount
volcano
Helen or whatever I don't know what the hell that mountain is. No, Mount Rainier. I think that's what it is. So it's here's how I'll exit. I was trying to think about this last night when I was dicking around, like, what is this like? And people hate microtransactions, right? The rage right now is how much money that Diablo game is making. And that's totally fine. This is the equivalent of making a microtransaction game. It's no different than the impetus of your project being, well, we're going to sell it with microtransactions. Okay, so here's the game. This is the same. And if you dislike one, then I don't really know why you dislike the other, except for this fleeting notion that what you have is valuable. But I'll just repeat it. The painting on the wall that I have is valuable. The print of the painting isn't. The fact that I can just facsimile your shit makes it not valuable. And if I tried to make a facsimile of a dollar bill, I'd be thrown in jail. Maybe I'll try, though. Okay. Couple of PlayStation Plus related things randomly last night. In fact, I saw this on our Discord. Come join us on Discord if you're a $5 or up patron. Almost 5,000 of you there, I think now. And someone posted that, whoa, Super Stardust Portable randomly appeared on PSN. I was like, really? So I stopped what I was doing and went and looked, and there it was. The 2008 port for PlayStation Portable of the 2007 Housemarque game Super Stardust HD is now available, but you cannot buy it a la carte. It's only available for PS Plus Premium, and that disappointed me because I went to try to buy it a la carte. It's unclear if it has trophies as well. The trophies are not on PSN profiles yet, but the game just popped up and they might not have published them. It might not even haven't been intended to be released as of yet, but it's appeared. And I thought something even more interesting happened that I wanted to bring it to attention. PlayStation Europe tweeted out the following. We're planning to roll out NTSC options for a majority of classic games offered on the PlayStation Plus Premium and Deluxe plan in Asia, Europe, Middle East, India, South Africa, Australia, and New Zealand regions. So there we go. Dustin,
what do you think? I mean, how many?
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, can Chris and I take at least a little bit of credit for this?
Maybe? You can, but sure you can, but definitely take a little bit of credit for it. But just, also, I was suggesting the other thing, which is that you almost have to kiss his ring again, don't you? I mean, he's laying it on pretty thick now.
I know. Well, I don't know. Is this what we got to do in order to get Sony to not do the bare minimum? Is make these ridiculous claims and stuff like this? I don't know. Jim, are you listening? What's going on here? I mean, we can work something out if we need to. Some different exchange of favors or whatever that may be. I'm not opposed to it, but we got to get that Tomba on the service first before I'm willing to negotiate.
Fair enough. Things are looking pretty good.
Yeah.
With PlayStation Plus. It's funny. I really don't want it, but if they continue to do shit like this, then I'm gonna have no choice but to get it, because Stardust Portable is a nice little weekend game. I'm not gonna play without trophies. I already played it without trophies. I don't need to play it without trophies again.
Yeah.
So there it is. And anything to add, Chris, before we move on from NTSC?
Oh, well, I'll say. I'm just going to go ahead and say that we did this. We did this.
Good.
You can
I got back up.
You can thank us for this, because I don't think I saw anybody else really caring. I know Digital Foundry did, but what? So what? They're kind of big or somewhat. Big deal. We did it. We did it. It's I did it. In fact, me exclusively.
Well, hey.
Wow.
Sorry.
I'm cutting Dustin out. That's fine.
I don't like this. I had to kiss Jim Ryan's ring. I had to apologize on the show, and now you're going to take credit. I don't know if I accept this.
You set yourself up for that, though. Like, you didn't have to do that.
I did set myself up, but Chris, I don't know. I mean, United Front here, man. I don't appreciate it.
All right. I wanted to bring this video to people's attention. It comes from DIY Perks on YouTube. Do-it-yourself perks.
Oh, yeah.
Building the world's first PlayStation 5 Slim. I don't know if you guys watched this. It's half an hour. Yeah, Chris, talk to me about this. This is pretty cool. This guy basically created a custom PS5 that fits in a case that is like an inch thick. And it actually works. So what do you make of this? This is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think at the end of it, he actually talks about how it actually runs cooler than the original PS5 design. Like everything's a lot colder in his Slim design, which is kind of interesting. I think it's because it uses water cooling, as opposed to the PS5, which I don't believe uses water cooling. I'm pretty sure it doesn't.
No, they use the liquid metal.
Yeah.
Fan. Yeah.
But I thought it was awesome. Like, I love these projects when people take things apart. And like, I was watching one a couple months ago of somebody taking their PS5 and making it look like an Atari, like making it like kind of like a 70s like wood finish type of like a machine that you would see in an arcade cabinet or like a television unit in the 70s. I thought, it was like, this is so cool. I wish I could do that stuff. But I think this video was interesting to me purely because it showed how easy these things are to fuck up, because at some point in the video, he just kills the motherboard entirely because he didn't ventilate it right. And he had to take apart like some sponsored PS5 that he was given, and he just sacrificed it, took the motherboard out. But it's like, it's not super complicated to take these things apart, but it is, it's not without its risks. So, don't try that at home unless you've got like 10 PS5s spare. But I thought this was awesome. Like, I thought it was really cool. I still think I still don't think the methodology of getting it all into that case was entirely sound. Like, I'm pretty sure he showed like the back of it and how like it's got all these like copper coils like coming out of it. It's like
there's an external unit. Yeah, that has like server grade fans on it.
Yeah, so the PS5 Slim that we're going to get is likely much bigger than this thing. But it's cool to see what people can get away with, just as long as they can kind of rig things in a certain way. Because that is impressive to get it running in that small, what is it, like an inch? Max?
Yeah, it's an inch thick, but with a massive, like you said, a massive power unit, which is, I hate power bricks. There's like the worst thing about laptops and all the rest and how they've slowly gotten those smaller, which I appreciate. Yeah.
The 360 had a rough one.
Oh, yeah. It had its own light on it, as I remember, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had its own like green light. I remember that.
Yeah. And if it was red, you were fucked.
Dustin, do you have anything to add before we move on?
I love DIY projects like this. I know I saw someone else that some people like did entirely new cases that weren't like super slim, but I saw someone that made like a wooden case that actually, it almost looked like a retro like 70s PS5. That was pretty cool. So I love seeing stuff like this.
That's the one that I saw, I think.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So, dude, DIY, like, modders are insane. I saw a guy the other day that made a handheld Virtual Boy just because it was like a challenge, like, because it would be fun. It was a really interesting video. I love watching stuff like this.
Okay. Let's see. Oh, I just wanted to bring this up really quick. Uncharted, the film. Tom Holland, Marky Mark, coming to Netflix, July 15th. If you're interested. Is anyone interested in watching it again? I'm not. I don't really watch movies again, typically. But I was pretty warm on this movie when we watched it, and I don't hate this movie at all. Like I really don't. I don't know. I just the more it's like that's why I'm kind of like high on this Gran Turismo idea. I'm like, okay,
yeah,
why not?
I might put it on in the background while I do other stuff, because it is kind of like good nothingness kind of, like, I'm not really that interested in what the fuck's happening. It doesn't really matter. It's suitably entertaining. I wasn't on the spoiler cast for it because I don't even remember what the fuck happened. I think I literally slept through the Uncharted movie. But I think it's one of those movies that I could see being good for just like background stuff, especially because I've seen it already. I tend to only do that, actually. It's funny that Colin says he never watches movies again, because that's almost exclusively what I do. I almost never see new movies unless I'm like dragged out to see them, because I'm just like, I'm just going to watch, Evil Dead 2 or Spider-Man 2 again, or put on every episode of Seinfeld in immediate succession because I've seen it a million times and I don't have to pay attention. But I'm curious about how I'll feel about it on a second watch, because I remember coming out of it being like, yeah, it's about what I expected. It's, it's suitably fine. I don't believe Tom Holland as Nathan Drake at all, but whatever. I felt very whatever about it, and I have a feeling it's probably just going to stay the same if I see it again.
Okay. I wanted to bring this up really quick. Crisis Core. We talked about it last week. The PSP game, 2007 or 2008, depending on where you live in the world. Well-liked PSP classic, or Final Fantasy VII prequel about Zack. And we were talking about how it's kind of a port, it looks up-resed, but guys, it looks fucking good. Like, really good. And I don't know if you guys watched this trailer that I put in, but it's maybe a remake, kind of. And I was curious about, actually, I really should have used this here, but I'm just going to go up to the end. We usually have 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas from the audience. One of these will make sense right now. Gundleman wrote in and said, hey guys, I think we need to settle this once and for all. What are the exact definitive differences between a remaster, a remake, a reimagining, and a remix? Imagine you're writing an entry to the PlayStation Gaming Thesaurus. What would you classify The Last of Us Part 1? We can get to that, but I'm kind of wondering what the fuck we would classify this. I don't know if you guys are looking at this. This doesn't seem to me to be a remaster of the game. They're calling it that. What do you think about this, Dustin?
Yeah, it definitely doesn't. And I'm glad you posted this video, because it's been so long since I've seen what that game actually looks like running. I think I played it. No, I don't think I played it at all on PSP, but I was shocked. I was like, wow, this is definitely much, much more than a remaster. When it comes to those terms, it is, this is the problem with gaming, as we've talked about many times, is that genres and terms don't really have any set definition. So, the idea, like, I don't know, to me, a remaster involves using almost entirely the same assets, but up-resed and improved with better, maybe you improve some textures, up the resolution or whatever, up the frame rate, and call it a day. You're kind of just tuning things up. But as soon as you get into like replacing character models and recreating environments, you're definitely more on the remake side of things. And this clearly, to me, looks like a remake. The question is, why is Square defining it as a remaster? Maybe it's like, maybe they're not changing the gameplay at all, so they don't want to call it a remake like they are Final Fantasy VII remake. But I don't know. It's hard to say.
If you go to the trailer at 4:54, there's a side by side of, I guess that would be Eris. And is that Eris or is it Tifa?
4:54.
That's Eris. Yeah.
Yeah. Eris.
Yeah. So in the original, it says, the original, and then it has the remaster, the so-called remaster. Then it has her in Final Fantasy VII remake, in 4K and all of that. You can just see that while in the pre-rendered stuff, there's no doubt that they're just up-resing what's already there. I think in the game, the beat-to-beat game seems to have remade assets. Like, you can't, there's just certain things they're showing where I'm like, this wouldn't look like this without, and you can't, and I don't think this is like rudimentary AI up-resing and making new assets and shit, because what we saw what that looks like, that's what happened to Grand Theft Auto remaster, where they're like just mistranslating signs and stuff. Like, this is really good. This is hand done. And it brings up this question, Chris, which I'm curious what you think, and it comes from Glendelman again. What is the difference between all of these? And I would say that remaster is what you're describing, Dustin, this idea of going in and using the original assets and making them shinier. And then remaking is remaking it from the ground up. I think that's Demon Souls and all of that. Reimagining, I would look at that as like Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Yeah.
And then remix, I don't even know if that's if that's different, really, right? Like, I just think there's a remaster, a remake, and a reimagining. And
yeah, I would agree.
Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1 was a remake, but it seems like now we're in reimagining territory with Final Fantasy VII. I know a lot of people are talking about how this is like a sequel almost, and I don't really see it like that personally. It doesn't really make any sense compared to where we are in the story, but
yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I'm saying, like, you could argue that Final Fantasy VII Remake was more of a reimagining than a remake. Like, it definitely did have, obviously it had remake aspects of it. They definitely did like overhaul the original game and make it from the ground up and do a bunch of crazy stuff. But there's also story beats that are in different places. You know, I think I remember talking to a friend of mine who was like, "Oh, Sephiroth shows up in a completely different, like he doesn't show up this early or something like that, where it's in the original." And I'm like, "Oh, interesting." So they're actually fucking with the story, and even by the end of Final Fantasy VII Remake, you know, you can tell that they're going in a different direction with it, which is not something that you would expect from a pure remake. I think remakes have a certain kind of spectrum to them. I think you can have something that is like Destroy All Humans remake, you know, which is not called remake, but it's like very clearly like it's using the original engine on PS2. It's using like, or not using the original engine, but it's using basically the original gameplay framework. It's basically using the same basic geometry. It's adding a couple new powers, maybe some cut content here and there, same voice acting. That's arguably both. That's arguably like a remaster remake type situation because it's the same geometry, it's the same exact voice acting and all that stuff. But it's got new gameplay mechanics, it's got cut content. That's a weird space to exist in. Final Fantasy VII, which is like a reimagining. And then you got this, which is, you know, certain parts of it look like a remaster. I think when you're in the cutscenes, it looks like they just literally like took the assets and swapped them out for newer ones. But it's like the same animation rigs, maybe like cleaned up a little bit, same choreography, same cinematography. But then the gameplay, I'm looking at it and I'm like, that looks like remake territory. And I think it's just another example of, like Dustin and you guys were saying, it's just another example of terminology in the games industry not really having that much meaning. Like what is Halo 2 Anniversary? You know what I mean? Like that's a remaster, kind of. It's using a bunch of new ads, but then you can flip between them, and then there's like new cutscenes entirely from the ground up.
Well, maybe that's the remix. Maybe I'm premature.
Yeah, maybe that is a remix. Like I don't know. I do think we should start nailing these terms down though, because
I agree.
I don't think Final Fantasy VII Remake is a remake. Like,
well, it's clear it's not now, right?
Yeah.
Like not at least entirely. It's just starting from the same point, and then, well, man, not even, because there's prequel stuff in Final Fantasy VII, but it's starting from the same subject matter and then kind of seeing where it goes, like a different dice roll, almost.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that
Final Fantasy VII reroll.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
I feel like, I don't know, I felt pretty, like, at the beginning of this conversation, like, oh, we need to create clear terms, but it's obvious now when we name some of these examples that it's like there's kind of a gradient where, like you said, with Destroy All Humans or the Halo Anniversary, it's like it's kind of sitting in both camps a little bit, and so it's kind of okay for it to be both in some ways. You know, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that we like to be able to clearly define things, but obviously that's not always the way that things work.
Yeah. Remakes are fluid, I guess.
True. Well, we remade our game Super Perils of Baking, and that was I would consider that a remake. Everything's new, but it's based on all of the original stuff. But it is kind of remixed too, so I don't know. I don't want to talk about it anymore. It's giving me a fucking brain hemorrhage. What I do want to talk about next, though, is just a couple things with Bungie. Acknowledging them to be Sony properties, to be PlayStation property, although not within PlayStation Studios. Two pieces of litigious matters to get to. First, Torrent Freak reports Bungie and Destiny 2 cheat creator agree to $13.5 million copyright damages judgment. And kind of the top line here says, game developer Bungie and elite boss Tekka, creator of cheating software for the popular Destiny 2 game, have reached an agreement to end a copyright infringement lawsuit. The stipulated consent judgment, in which elite boss Tech admits thousands of violations of the DMCA's anti-circumvention provisions, includes a permanent injunction and statutory damages of $13.5 million. And Bungie says in part that they basically, part of their success hinges on the ability of players to understand that it's fair, that the game is fair and being treated fairly. And it's an interesting argument. However, they're now taking it to the next level, or I guess to a new suit. And this comes from Video Games Chronicle. A Destiny YouTuber who allegedly impersonated Bungie is being sued by the studio for $7.7 million. So speaking of DMCA strikes, you'll remember that, and we talked about this back in March on the show, that there were a series, like a really pretty insane series of DMCA challenges for Destiny content that were issued by a party that wasn't Bungie. And we were talking at the time that Bungie was working to unmask who this was, and apparently they've been able to do that, and they filed a lawsuit. And the YouTuber is Nick Miner, aka YouTuber Lord Nazo. And it says in the story, quote, last December, the YouTube channel of Lord Nazo was issued a takedown notice after publishing music from the original soundtrack for Destiny expansion, The Taken King, which Bungie says infringed copyrights and violated its policy on fan use of intellectual property. Rather than remove the video, Miner is alleged to have left it online until YouTube deleted it in January. Bungie claims that, seemingly in retaliation, Miner created fake Gmail accounts in order to pose as the studio's brand protection vendor, CSC, and send out a wave of fraudulent takedown notices, targeting videos posted by members of the Destiny community. So, Chris, I'm curious what you think of this. This is I kind of dig Bungie's approach. Like, they're very aggressive and Nintendo-like, actually, in taking care of themselves. And I'm curious what you think about them going after these particular people. The first one, a modder. The second one, someone kind of messing with their YouTube community, which is really important to them. Their streaming community. As a big Bungie guy and a big Destiny player, I'm just curious if you have any comment on these.
I think it's I think it's hilarious that someone's Joker moment was them getting a copyright strike from Bungie. They're just like, fuck it, I'm gonna burn the whole world down. I think I'm of a couple minds with this, where it's like, my initial defense or my initial reaction to hearing, big company, comes down on modder. That headline in and of itself has me almost intrinsically like, oh, well, I'm on the modder's side, because that's kind of fucked. Because I like mods. I enjoy modding my games. I go on Nexus mods all the time. It's fun. But in this case, where Bungie is making a live service game, the quality of that game hinges on the structural integrity of the online ecosystem. Cheaters are a fucking huge problem, and they ruin the game for everybody. They ruin the game for the developers. It's just a complete shit show. It's just, nobody likes those people. So I'm kind of glad that they just went after this dude. Like, I'm glad, but like specifically the content creator part, like the one of this dude creating all these false DMCAs, that to me, it is insane to me that someone would even do that. You know what I mean? Like, that someone would even impersonate, and that you can, by the way, is crazy. That's such an easy, apparently it's like a very easy loophole that YouTube really needs to address, because it doesn't seem like it's as complicated as you would assume it would be to kind of take other people down for other people's content and basically impersonate an entire company. But yeah, I'm on Bungie's side with both of these. Like, don't fuck with people's livelihood just because you got a copyright strike. I get copyright strikes all the time. You re-edit the video, or you find some other, or you just take the hit and like whatever. Like, I've definitely done that, where it's like I've used Rammstein music in a video that I knew it was going to get copyrighted, but like I thought, like, I want to make this video. I think it'll be cool, so I'll take the hit because I think it'll be a good video. And that's what you do sometimes. Like, if it really matters that much to you, you'll put in the work to circumvent that copyright. You'll put in the work to re-edit your video, and you're not going to throw a hissy fit and take other people in your own community down with you just because you have this like weird spiteful point to prove that doesn't even really prove anything. If anything, all this really did was, kudos to the guy, I guess, because he highlighted a really deep flaw in YouTube system that allows people to take advantage of this. But ultimately, I do like the way Bungie's conducting themselves. It sends a message to cheaters, who should, quite frankly, be the most punished group in you know what I mean? Like, I hate they ruin everything. It's not even like modders who are like, oh, look, I put a big head mode in Tekken. It's just like straight up like, oh, I'm just going to shoot through walls in like the competitive mode, and you'll have no chance, and it's going to ruin the game for you for like months. So I'm all about Bungie right now. Like, props to them.
Yeah, they're definitely creating a situation. I think it's important to protect yourselves in this way, because they're creating a rhythm where it's like, if you fuck around, we're the worst case scenario that you couldn't imagine. You guys were a little young, but it's like in the early 2000s when people literally started getting sued for millions and millions and millions of dollars for downloading music and movies. And it's like, you'll never think that will happen to you. And they're almost like, no, it will. It will happen to you. We're going to make an example out of you. And I think it's good to protect the sanctity of your game, the reliability of your game, and your audience itself. So good for them. If you have a couple of in-house lawyers who make as much money as they do, yeah, I would have these guys fucking chasing everyone for shit that they were doing wrong.
And I think they're handling it way better than Nintendo, because at least, Nintendo's like overly litigious. Like they'll just go like, you made a video about Mario and you had Mario music in it. Fuck you. Like they're a bit much.
Nintendo's obnoxious.
I feel like Bungie is like exactly where you should be. You're stern, you're strong, you stand up where you need to stand up, but otherwise they're totally like, there's entire YouTube channels that dedicate themselves to making Destiny content and they make a living off of it. Like people like My Name is Bife who just do lore shit and they use their music in it all the time and they're thriving, and they support that because I think Bungie more than most developers understands the importance of, a vibrant and healthy community. I think that's a lot of thanks to like Red versus Blue in the early days, but they're a good company. I like Bungie a lot.
All right, I'm curious what you guys think of this. This has been long rumored. I feel like I've known about this behind the scenes, but I don't know if we've talked about it or reported on the rumor. But Creative Assembly has long been working on a shooter. We haven't seen Creative Assembly, the British team, work on anything other than strategy games since really Alien Isolation, which is 2014, I think. So they've had this new shooter going for a while behind the scenes. They finally announced it. It's called Hyenas. They released what looks like a gameplay / cinematic trailer in some respect. And I don't know. I'm really interested to hear what you guys think of this. Dustin, let's go to you first. These generic shooters, I don't understand what these different people are doing. I'm not saying that Hyenas is going to be good or bad. I have no idea, but it just seems like people are making the same games with the same aesthetic, and it just seems boring to me. I feel like you're so late to this, and I'm curious. I know I'm not Infinity War. I know that Creative Assembly is probably anxious to try to do other things, but I don't know. When I saw this, I was underwhelmed. What do you think?
So I have to say that I actually, in one aspect, liked the trailer they put out because it almost has this Into the Spider-Verse feel to it. I don't know whether it's just the way they kind of make the frame rate choppy in a good way, not in like a gameplay way, because this is not a gameplay trailer. So I can't diss it completely, but you can tell, like with a lot of these games, that these characters don't look like Fortnite characters necessarily, but you can tell that they're designed that it's like, oh, be yourself, aka buy the microtransactions to customize your character to be whatever you want, wacky or whatever. So I don't know. The at least interesting thing that I'm reading from this Gamatsu article that you posted is that it seems like one of the main emphasis of this title is you can fight in zero gravity. So pretty bold move, since this is not always something that's easy to achieve and do well. And that's probably what this game will live and die by, is that if this zero G fighting sucks and that's their main emphasis, then it's probably DOA. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's probably DOA. I don't want to say it's DOA even if it's good, because sometimes a really good game can come out and shock people and start to gain momentum on Twitch or something like that. But it's just like, there's so many of them that how can you survive, really?
It says here on Engadget, quote, you join 3-person teams to raid spaceship shopping malls for the coveted merch left behind by Mars billionaires. You'll have to compete against 4 other loot-seeking teams while simultaneously dealing with security systems, hired goons, and zero gravity. You can not only flip gravity on and off, but use bridge-making goo and other special abilities to claim the upper hand, end quote. It sounds cool, but so here's the thing, Chris, and I'll be curious what you think of this. Like, that sounds like a story. If you just say, remove all the other things, raids spaceship shopping malls for the coveted merch left behind by Mars billionaires, just sounds like it could be a single player game. That's an idea. That in and of itself is a differentiator. But then when you look at it, it looks generic to me. So it loses that individuality. What do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, where I was like, that's a good idea for a show even, but it's so, when I was watching the trailer, I was like, wow, I've never seen something look so different and the same at the same time, because that's definitely
a great way to put it,
because there is definitely like a uniqueness to it. There is something there that I've not seen before, but at the same time, all of it tangentially reminds me of other things. Like I got Borderlands kind of vibes from some parts of it. I got these almost Bulletstorm vibes from some of it too, where like I'm like, what exactly is there's this one scene too, there's a lot of comedy, quotations in a lot of these new trailers, where it's like it's a shooter and like every character is like an individual and they're really cool and wacky, and you're gonna have a favorite one, and it's so strange, because I didn't think we would ever get here exactly, but I'm at a point now where I'm staying with a friend of mine, Kingston, who's obviously been he's been a big part of my channel. We stream a lot on Twitch, but I'm staying at his place, and in the living room there's an Xbox, and I was playing. He had Gears of War 2 installed, and I was playing through it, and I was like, I kind of miss the seriousness of old competitive. Like I don't know what it is. I'm starting to miss that, because everything right now feels like a colorful nightmare, like almost like it's like an acid trip that you don't want to be a part of. And every game feels that way, even like Overwatch, fucking Battleborn, fucking this now, X Defiant, that weird oh my god, what the hell was that concept art that we just saw recently about like of that nice park with all the, you remember that?
Yes.
It's hard to keep track of all of them.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
But like everything has this like splash of color, and I like color. Like I it's what drew me to Halo for a long time. It's like I like Jet Set Radio, and I love colorful shit. But for some reason, shooters feel like they're stuck in this weird mode of like, we gotta be wacky. Even Apex Legends, which kind of started off a little bit more serious and a little bit more gritty, has come out, and I remember they had like a trailer for at like one Game Awards or like one gaming event that was like, a new character is coming to Apex Legends, and it's just this fucking comedian basically, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, there's no identity to anything anymore. Everything is trying to be Eric Andre almost. It's just like, isn't it crazy? Subversion of expectations. And it's like, no, I want to play a game with sound mechanics that at least takes itself slightly seriously. Just slightly?
Chris,
I don't know.
Don't you think that it's possible? Like, to me, it just spells like, I'm agreeing with everything that you're saying, but I'm thinking that the reason why is just that eventually if you make your game set and it's serious and it's set in a specific type of world, you eventually run out of different ways to customize your character.
1,000,000%.
And in this game, it's like, we can sell a chef hat. We can sell you lobster arms. We can sell literally anything that you can think of. It will fit in this game's world. And so that's kind of, it seems like, from Fortnite, it's like, yeah, you can have a spatula as your pickaxe. And so anything really can go. And that's to their benefit from a monetization standpoint.
100%. A lot of design is fueled by monetization plans later on down the line to see like how drastically, because you can't. It's what I appreciate a lot about Destiny, actually, is because Destiny has had a lot of customization over the years. It's got its own wacky stuff, but all of the wacky stuff fits within the context of the universe. There's like all these holograms, and there's like an in-lore, there's an in-universe explanation. There's like all of this stuff that like no skin feels out of place in Destiny, because it's all about like, it just works. But in Fortnite, you have like, oh yeah, look, there's Zendaya and Master Chief and Kratos and Rick and Morty literally fighting in the Daily Bugle, and it's a fucking cacophony. It's a mess. But that is to the strength of monetization. It's like, yeah, well, eventually you hit a ceiling of absurdity if you ground your game in realism, or if you ground your game in any kind of universe that has any kind of laws or any kind of written, reason behind it. It's easier to just get away with, yeah, why not? We could put SpongeBob in this game, because that would be a huge brand deal. and it wouldn't be out of place. It wouldn't be weird in Fortnite to see SpongeBob putting a shotgun to Zendaya's face. Like that wouldn't be a strange thing at all in Fortnite. But like if you saw that in Call of Duty Warzone, you'd be a little baffled, I think. So no, you're right. I do think it's largely monetization driven, but at the same time, I'm starting to get really tired of this desperate need for every game to treat me like it's a Geico commercial. You know, like where it's like, oh, we're the only ones doing silly commercials. Everyone else is trying to sell you shit. And then every other commercial tries to be funny. And then suddenly Geico doesn't matter anymore.
No, totally. Dude, it's what a wonderful point. Because I say that to people sometimes. It's more pronounced because I'm a little older than you. I tell people all the time. I remember there was a time when commercials weren't funny.
Yeah.
It was rare when a commercial might be charming or you might smile, but they weren't trying to like be goofy and shit. That's like a product of the 21st century.
Some of them were sad.
Right. Yeah. Remember you guys are young for this, but I'm sure you've seen it. That This Is Your Brain on drugs.
No,
commercial.
1,000,000%. Yeah.
That's like, or the one where the kid is smoking cigarettes and his dad's yelling at him and he's like, I learned it from you. Like those were the commercials I fucking grew up with, trying to scold your ass and all that.
Yeah.
So I think you're totally right. I think about that sometimes where I watch football and everything is funny or trying to be funny. And that's fine, but that's new. You're absolutely right about that. All right. Let's see. A few other things to get through here. Overwatch 2. Some confusion about this. Overwatch 2 launches October 4th, speaking of games that are generic. Well, although Overwatch wasn't.
It was the OG.
Games.
One of the, well, yeah, in that realm.
So that's a little harsh. But it comes out October 4th. And we were a little confused. And I think everyone was because they just weren't clear about it. So they released a statement about what's going on with this. Because is Overwatch and Overwatch 2, are they going to sit side by side? I went and looked some stuff up. And originally what they had said about this was that they were going to sit side by side once Overwatch 2 came out. And then they would slowly be integrated into one. However, it seems like that's going to be happening very soon indeed. IGN reports that Aaron Keller, the director of Overwatch 2, in a Reddit AMA said the following, quote, when Overwatch 2 launches on October 4th, it will be a replacement for the current live service, end quote. It's over for Overwatch. What, Dustin? Chris, I'm sorry. You have something to say here.
Why even make it a new thing, Ben?
I don't know.
Activision Blizzard. I mean, they did it with Destiny 2.
I know, yeah, exactly.
They're just doing it again, but they had to scramble at the last minute. Like,
isn't it a shame that I know they really can't do this. I know there's just semantical reasons and it's really not worth it. But part of me, if I were a big Destiny fan, if I were a big Bungie fan, would be like, can we just call it Destiny again?
I've thought that.
Can we just, yeah. Do we have to call it Destiny 2? Like, can't we just call it Destiny now? Again, we're not in Activision's realm anymore.
I've wanted that for so long. It's just so annoying for it to be a 2 when it's just not, and it doesn't need to be. But I don't know. It's too late. I think probably because Activision technically owns publishing rights for Destiny.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? So they probably can't call it Destiny.
It's also too late, pardon the pun.
Yeah, it's true.
All right. Couple more things. I wanted to bring this up. I cut the wrap up where we talk about every game coming to PlayStation. I just decided to get rid of that. It just felt like we were going through the motions for that. But I promised that if I saw an interesting game that would have been in that wrap up, that I wanted to bring it to your attention more vividly. And one of those games is Call of the Wild: The Angler, which was announced recently. And I want to kind of set the stage for this. Everyone knows Avalanche, not to be confused with Avalanche Software. Those are the guys that are making the Harry Potter game. What is it called? Hogwarts Legacy. Avalanche is a European studio, and they are one time known for Just Cause, right? In 2009, they did a game called The Hunter. This is important. This game came only to PC, but it was a hunting game, supposed to be like a realistic hunting game. It was followed years later by a 2015 game that also only came to PC called The Hunter Primal, which was then brought to PS4 in 2017 as Call of the Wild. I'm setting this all up because people will remember that at this time, Avalanche split into 3 teams. We don't talk about this very much anymore. Avalanche Studios is the team that makes Just Cause, and they made Rage 2 with Bethesda, and now they're making that game Contraband with Xbox. Expansive Worlds is this team we're working with. These are the guys that made Primal and Call of the Wild. And then there's Systemic Reaction, which made the game I wanted so badly to like, but it is so bad, Generation Zero. And they also made that 2021 game, Second Extinction, which is also only on Xbox. We never got that on PlayStation. So Expansive Worlds is making a follow-up to the Hunter Call of the Wild, which is considered one of the great, if not the great, open world hunting game. This game is supposed to be very cerebral, very thoughtful, and all of the rest. And we were talking about these other games, right, guys? We were talking about Hyenas and all of this. Hyenas' official YouTube video that it's linking out to has views in the thousands. Okay, the Crisis Core thing I was bringing up earlier with the comparisons has something like 75,000 views. Call of the Wild: The Angler, an open world sequel to The Hunter, which is an open world fishing game. 207,000 views on their intro trailer. I don't know if I doubt you guys have anything to say about this. You don't have to say anything about it if you don't want to. I just wanted to bring it up. I promised you guys I would bring up games that caught my eye. Pardon the pun. This is one that caught my eye. I love the idea of an open world fishing game. I love the idea of video games being anything you can possibly think of. And I love the idea of a studio dedicating itself to this shit. I think it's awesome. And so I wanted to call it out.
It is really cool.
12-player multiplayer.
Yes.
You can go out with your buds. That's the most appealing aspect. If it's like me and a few, it's like, yeah, we're going to go fishing. Like you find a spot, you go out on a boat, maybe the boat capsizes or something. Like who knows? There's something, so many things that could happen.
There's something really sad about this though, because it's like, it's almost like we're taking these experiences and digitizing them because we know we won't have them for long.
Well, it's so funny. I was thinking the same thing from the perspective of if you're an angler, do you want to do this or do you want to go and fish? And I think it's just the same argument. It's like, well, I like hockey. I'm going to go play NHL though. I'm not going to fucking strap on my skates and go to the rink and play right now. I'm going to do this instead. So I'm fascinated by these guys. I want to know more about Expansive Worlds. I'm writing this down too. I'm going to see if I can reach out to them at some point and talk about their games. Because I like video games being anything that they can be. And I love Avalanche's approach of splitting up their resources, realizing that they basically had 3 internal teams that all can focus on different things. I think it's a wise use of resources. So shout out to them. Wanted to bring that up. And a couple more things I just wanted to bring up in passing. Eurogamer has a story that people might want to check out. We've been talking a lot about SnowRunner on the show recently. And I was explaining to everyone that comes from an old PC game that was kickstarted called Spin Tires. And of course, that gave way to the game Mudrunner. These are all involved with Saber Interactive. However, there's like a really interesting lawsuit going on with, I guess, the original developer, the publisher of the original game, and then Saber Interactive, and all of this drama between them. If people want to read about it, they can. It's on Eurogamer, and it's called Saber Interactive Files Defamation Claim Amid Spin Tires Legal Dispute. So basically, they were sued for all this shit, and then they countersued. And it's all over these popular truck simulations and like the person who made them, this guy in Russia and all the rest. So I wanted to bring that up if anyone wanted to check that out. And finally, there's a really extensive piece on gamesindustry.biz that I thought was fascinating. I read it this morning. It's called Tomb Raider and Transmedia: What's Next for Embracer Group? And it's basically this extensive conversation with Lars Wingsfor, who is the CEO of Embracer Group, who we bring up all the time on the show. But he talks about their intentions with all of their studios and what they want to do. And it just seems like a really more thoughtful approach than maybe we thought. And so if you're interested in the machinations of the industry, you might want to check out that piece as well. But now it's finally time to get into what we're playing. And Dustin, let's begin with you. Sure. What have you been keeping yourself busy with this last week?
So my intention was to sit down and play Resident Evil 2. Now that there's the PS5 upgrade, I started it when it came out, but I never finished it. And so I'm just going to restart fresh. Played the beginning, got through the intro part with the gas station and the oddly realistic burger that the trucker eats, that moment there, which always stands out to me for some reason.
Yeah.
And then I saved, and I think I paused and I got up and got a drink or something like that. And I was thinking about it and I thought, I really have always wanted to play Resident Evil 1, but I never have. And I know I have it from PlayStation Plus, and it will be impossible, not impossible, but it will feel impossible to play if I play this game first and then try to play it later. Like, you know what? I'm doing it. So I downloaded it and I played it, beat it. Gotta say, I appreciate it for what it is and the time frame, but it's dated. It's got some really annoying aspects, particularly. I know some people were annoyed with when I said this on Twitter, but the door animations, I get it. They're nostalgic. They were there probably in the original PS1 version in order to let the disc load, right? But we're talking 5 seconds every time you go through a door that you have to see this stupid door animation. And they change it up with different doors. I guess you got some variety, but I just was like, man, this is so annoying. And it's, sometimes it's frustrating where it's like, feel like I'm pointing the gun at the right direction, but apparently I'm not. So that would happen to me a few different times. And then it's just like, and now, especially that I'm playing Resident Evil 2, you can see the quality of life improvements that just make it's just so obvious. Like when you go in Resident Evil 2 and you look at the map, you can see what key is at what door. So there were times in Resident Evil 1 where I was like, okay, I have this key, but I don't remember where I need to unlock. So then I just go and explore around the mansion and try to figure out where I need to unlock. Thus, going through 5 million fucking doors at a 5-second animation to play through each one. So that definitely gets annoying. And to be honest and fair, I played through the game on the easy mode just because I'm mainly just trying to get the story, get the feel for what this original game was like, stuff like that. And so overall, though, it was a good experience to be able to see that part of gaming history. But I gotta say that unless you have pure nostalgia for this game, it's hard to recommend unless you understand going into it that it's dated. Even the GameCube remake, I can't even imagine what the PS1 version is like. But Resident Evil 2, real good so far. The PS5 mode there's a ray tracing mode that does not hold any kind of consistent frame rate. And what's annoying is I'm pretty sure I learned that the VRR mode on PS5 is only for 48 frames and above. So if your game dips below that, I think that's the right number. If your game dips below that, the VRR no longer works, which is really, it's like, come on, like it should have been a radius from 30 to 60 frames or something like that. So the ray tracing mode I can't recommend, but you can do the high frame rate mode, which is what I've been doing and has been really awesome to play through. It's like super buttery smooth. And it's been really fun going through. I'm still pretty early on. Like I did the initial thing where you got to get the 3 medallions and then you go down into the next area. So I haven't encountered, is it Mr. X? Mr. X. Yeah, I haven't encountered him yet, but I just know from seeing clips that is going to be so anxiety inducing.
Oh, for sure.
I hate being chased in a game. Like it's just something about it is so incredibly, that's the point, right? But I don't know, it feels like I'm like kind of dreading that aspect, but I'm sure it will be fun nonetheless.
Yeah.
And then in between, I'm also playing Ape Escape. And Chris, I just got to echo what you said last week, is that when you use the monkey radar in this game, you can press L1 and see a view of where that monkey is. They look like monkeys. I mean, are they monkeys or are they apes?
I don't know.
Like,
it's whatever.
But anyway, you get to see where they are, and it has this little description, and they're just so cute and charming.
Yeah.
There was one, and they're really like, I don't know if it's just because you see this stupid little monkey like looking like just blankly in the air. Like I found one today. It was like ate some yellow snow, and he's just like sitting there, and that was like this is what defines him, is that he ate some yellow snow recently, something like that.
Yeah.
So it's been a treat because it's funny thinking about that game, and that when it came out, it was I don't know if it was alongside or very close to the release of the DualShock. So it's one of those quote unquote gimmick games that's supposed to take advantage of the DualShock, and it revolves around that. And so it's not always implemented in a way that totally makes sense. Like there's some things that are annoying or frustrating, but overall, for a game that revolves around a quote unquote gimmick of using the DualShock, the sticks, it's like really awesome. And I'm really excited because I've never played Ape Escape 2. And so I'm going to dive into that afterwards. And that's just kind of like a game that I'll play. I've been found myself playing in the morning for just like 2 or 3 levels at a time and then move on. So
yeah,
I've been having fun with that. And then the last thing I just want to touch on briefly is that I did finish the Quarry, and the spoiler cast is coming out very soon, Saturday. So for patrons, it's tomorrow if you're listening to the release, and then non-patrons, you will get it at some point publicly. I just want to say that if you're thinking about checking out this game, I strongly encourage you to wait. Because the main thing that we agreed upon at the end of the spoiler cast is that this game is not worth $70. And it's not necessarily because of the length. The length is part of it, but it also just has to do with the level of polish and as Colin, I think, really nicely put, the production per square inch. And so I just want to put that out there as a little PSA. Hold off on the Quarry. I'm not saying it's not worth playing.
I would agree. I agree with you on that. Yeah.
Like $30 or $40, go for it, especially if you're interested. Just there's some caveats. Our spoiler cast will be, I think, spoiler free up until 20 minutes. It'll be a timestamp and it will be in the description, so you can hear our lighter thoughts on that. But I felt strongly that I wanted to put that out there to try to save some people, because it's obvious, I think, that this game will be discounted pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I will disagree with you in one way, is that the length of the game had nothing to do with my thoughts on pricing. It's an 8 or 10 hour game. That's perfectly fine for $70. I think it's just not a very high budget game. It is, and we'll talk about it on the show. I think it's comical, actually, in some ways, how poorly produced it is. And so I'll leave it for the spoiler cast there. But Chris, let's go on to you. Let's see what you're playing here.
Yeah, so I've been dabbling around with a couple different things, mainly because I'm traveling right now. So I'm trying to not get into anything that's super narrative focused, or not anything that's like a big, like, okay, I gotta really nail this down, because I don't have access to my PlayStation or my Xbox as consistently as I otherwise would. But I've still been playing Yakuza Like a Dragon. That's on my Xbox account, but I've been playing it through my phone because you can stream it, and it's kind of turn-based. So it's very, the latency doesn't really affect it that much. It's actually been a really nice way to play it. Still going through that slowly. It's been kind of my take a break game, playing some Tekken 2 on the PS Classics, and man, I am so bad at Tekken 2. I don't know what the hell happened. I used to be so good. I beat the hell out of that game when I was a kid. Now I'm just like, I'm getting stomped because these people just like, I forgot. And you know what's funny? Like, I don't think even at the time when I was a child, I really understood the gravity of how many combos are actually in Tekken until like I looked at it with like adult eyes and like actually went through the command list, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, this is some really tactile shit. Like, you could do some insane shit. That Yoshimitsu's in there. He's like my favorite. I love him. He's just I don't know what. Yeah, he's a classic character. I don't know what the hell he's from, because he seems to be from Tekken and Soul Calibur, like, or something else. Like, I don't remember where he's from initially, but he's almost like that. He's always like he's almost like the Maria Menounos of fighting characters, where he just like plays himself and everything, but he's not from anything. But I've been playing that a little bit, and for the plane and for the long stretches of time where I'm out here like waiting for meetings to happen and just waiting for people to get back to me, I've been playing The Outer Worlds on my laptop, because it's a game that I really got into, but then sort of fell off. I don't know what happened. I think just a bunch of other stuff came out, but I think after seeing Starfield at the game showcase recently, kind of got me an itch to play some RPGs, or some dialogue heavy RPGs, and didn't exactly want to get into Disco Elysium because, again, that's a bit new, and it's probably going to be a bit story heavy for me while I'm on a trip. So I figured, let me go back into The Outer Worlds, start from scratch, so I can maybe catch up to where I was. I was never really that far into it. I think it was maybe like 5 hours or so into it when I first put it down. But I know that it's a shorter game. It's like a more condensed RPG experience. I was like, this is perfect. And I've been going through it, going through the motions. I got to say, I really enjoy it still, but I'm still at a point where I remember everything that happens. So I'm kind of like speeding up to get to the point where like, okay, it's new things. But it plays really well. I really enjoy it. It's really feeding that hunger that I have to play RPGs lately that I haven't been really getting from a lot of other places. Obsidian just has a special flavor because it's like Bethesda with like a little bit more polish and a little bit more character. It always feels like I didn't want to play Fallout 3 or Skyrim again. So Outer Worlds was a good choice. But other than that, I've been a bit busy. So that's been my week or so in games.
Fair enough. For me, we already brought up the Quarry. I'll leave that to the spoiler cast. I brought up I was playing a game on N64. I've been spending most of my last week playing The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time on Switch. I got the premium Nintendo online, whatever the hell they call it, thing for $60, and I downloaded it and played it, and I'm doing a 100% run through it. I haven't done a 100% run through Ocarina of Time in probably, I don't know, 20 years, maybe even more than that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very, 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 very nostalgic game for me. It brings me back to 9th grade, November 1998. It reminds me of my best friend from childhood, Mike Pope. I was texting him, sending him screenshots and of it and all of that. And I'll leave my conversation because I'm playing it for knockback. The audience voted for us to do that, and we finally have gotten to it. And I'll leave it for that. But what I will say is that I always thought this was a wonderful game, like a really good game. I always thought it was a little bit overrated. I love Majora's Mask. I think Majora's Mask is a better game.
Me too.
But in playing it for the first time in so long, it's amazing, and I don't really know how else to put it, how much more I know about games now than I did then. And seeing it through eyes that have played, I don't know. I mean, how many games have I literally played since I played Ocarina of Time? 500? Something like that? I don't know. Well, it's like when you think about that and then you go back, you see it for what it is, and I see it for what it is in a really good way. I'm like, wow, this game is brilliant. And just, I see all the little ways they designed things. Like I was obsessing over the water, which is basically just like lines of 2D currents over each other. And I was coming back into the world, that hub world that goes off to the village and the Hyrule Castle and to these various places, Zora's domain and all that, and how it all comes back to you, and the muscle memories of the C stick or the C buttons at that time and all the rest. So I'll leave it to that, but going to be much to say about that soon. What I do want to talk about is a specific game that came out very recently. Robbie Nauman wrote in about it on Patreon and says, Colin and crew, how are you guys feeling about TMNT Shredder's Revenge? The gameplay and music are just absolutely excellent, and I love that you have the ability to dodge and double jump. The character progression, secrets, and challenges are also nice additions. Overall, I'm pumped on the game, and I'm not typically a beat-em-up guy. What do you guys think? This game's awesome. I bought it the night it came out, TMNT Shredder's Revenge. It was like a week ago from when we were recording this. And then I played just one stage by myself. The next night, Micah and I played locally all the way through from beginning to end, all 16 stages in one run. And it's exceptional. First of all, this goes back to my TMNT. And I don't know what's going on with TMNT. First of all, my TMNT in quotes lasted a pretty long time. Like I had bowed out and shit was going on for several years after I was bowed out of TMNT within that run, that original run. However, and those classic Playmates toys and all that, right? However, I feel like I was sucked back into that era and I didn't recognize everything that they were showing me, but I recognized most of it. In fact, some of the silhouette enemies I was calling, because they show a silhouette of the enemy you're going to fight when you begin the stage. And it's like, oh, that's that. It's Baxter Stockman. That's that, blah, blah. And I played as Leo. Micah played as Raph. And I just find it so charming because it seems like we were talking, I guess, here we go. We're talking about what a remixed game is. This seems like a remixed and extended version of the classic TMNT arcade game. Now, I don't know them encyclopedically enough anymore, but those were like in my vein type games when I was a kid. You better fucking believe it. The TMNT arcade port on NES is legendary because it's so good. And it's called TMNT 2 on NES, but that's the TMNT arcade game. What I like about this game is that they have a little ode to the original Konami TMNT game, which is contentious. I like that game a lot, but it's contentious with a lot of people. In that game, there's like an overworld map, and the TMNT, new TMNT is totally based on that. Like the overworld map is totally based on that look that you'll see from that original game. But you unlock Casey Jones when you beat the game. So you play as Casey Jones after that, but April and Splinter, which is a little strange, and then the 4 turtles. And it's just fun. The music is absolutely banging. It's just boom, boom, boom. Just fucking that great arcade kind of feel. You want to put it up. You want to kind of put the volume, customize the volume, put the volume of the effects down, put that music volume up. I also like how there's a campaign and then there's an arcade mode. So you can play the game straight up in arcade mode and see how you can do with a credit or 3 credits. We played the story mode, which is much more forgiving and allows you to kind of die a few times and revive your teammates and all the rest. And at $25, and I think it's $22 with PS Plus, I mean, that's a fucking steal. It's a ripoff, basically, for the developer, not for you. Because I think you can easily charge $39.99 for this game and get away with it, in my opinion. So highly, highly recommended. TMNT Shredder's Revenge. It is excellent. Excellent game. You can play online, apparently. Apparently, you can play with 6 people at a time. But having played locally with 2 people, it just brought me right back to being in the ground round or something as a kid on Long Island, waiting for our table, playing on the machine. That and the X-Men arcade game and the SNK machines with the Neo Geo stuff. Man, oh man. Good stuff. So check that out. And finally, before we roll on, Crab Dude 5000 wrote in and said, "Howdy, Sacred Slitters. I just wanted to give a quick thanks to Colin for the Wild Arms recommendation. I've totally fallen in love with this game over the past week since the launch of the new PS Plus tiers. I haven't gotten too far, but I already dare to say this is one of the best gaming soundtracks I've ever heard." Oh my God, of course, dude, the soundtrack. "Thanks for always keeping it in the conversation because it's a game this turn-based RPG lover wished he got to sooner. Thanks and all the best." We will keep it up. I encourage people. Wild Arms is one of my favorite games. I bring it up all the time. Go look up Wild Arms 1's PS1 intro and just watch it and listen to it. Listen to the music. And I bet you it's going to catch some of you because it's so fucking good. So good. Love it. So thank you. I'm glad, Crab Dude 5000, that you're enjoying it. All right, boys, let's get into the news. There's actually not much to get into. There are 3 extensive pieces of news, though, that we should read through. And the first one is number 1. Bad news, skateboarding video game fans. Activision was planning remakes of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, but it foiled its own plans. Word comes from an interesting source, Tony Hawk himself. The world-renowned skateboarder appeared on a Twitch channel called Andy THPS, which is apparently run by a veteran of Vicarious Visions. Before we get into the story, some necessary background. Vicarious Visions is an Activision-owned studio that has in recent months been wholesale folded into Blizzard. Indeed, it's no longer even called Vicarious Visions. It's instead called Blizzard Albany, and they're no longer working on their own projects, but instead in support of Blizzard. The studio was founded in the early 90s and purchased outright by Activision in 2005, and it's mostly been known for licensed games and ports, and also worked on the Guitar Hero franchise and helped support Skylanders as well. Now, Tony Hawk games were developed by now-defunct Activision outfit Neversoft, which started the franchise on PS1 in 1999. However, Vicarious Visions jumped in, often in support or to lead smaller games. The 2005 handheld iteration of Tony Hawk, American Skateland, which I think had an 8 in it, if I remember correctly, is one such game, and the studio later outright developed the 2006 game Downhill Jam, which came to PlayStation 2 in 2007. However, Vicarious Visions won many, many plaudits when it remade Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and its sequel from 1999 and 2000, respectively. That collection launched in 2020 on PlayStation 4 and came natively to PlayStation 5 last year, and it is beloved and sold very well. Now, here's where this Twitch stream with Tony Hawk comes in. On the stream, according to many sources, he said the following in part, referencing that Vicarious Visions was indeed going to remake Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, like it did with 1 and 2. Quote, "That was the plan, even up to the release day of 1 and 2. We were going to make 3 and 4. And then Vicarious got kind of absorbed, and then they were looking for other developers, and then it was over. Ellipsis. Activision didn't really trust anyone the way they trusted Vicarious, so they took other pitches from other studios, like, what would you do with this THPS title? And they didn't like anything they heard, and that was it." End quote. This is devastating news to fans of the series since Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4, which came to PlayStation 2 in 2001 and 2002 respectively, are beloved games as well, though a shade below the original 2. That we will likely never get those remakes is a shame, as is the current state of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater generally. The disastrous Robomoda developed Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5, launched on PlayStation 4 in 2020, literally put the developer out of business. Proving Ground is widely seen as the last core Tony Hawk's Pro Skater game worth playing, and it came to PlayStation 3 in 2007. Blizzard Albany is currently assigned to a support role on Blizzard Megalith's Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4. This bad news comes on the back of good news at rival publisher EA, however. Leaker Tom Henderson notes that Electronic Arts may be ready to show off its revival of its Skate franchise, Skate 4, as soon as 1 month from now. Josh Lee wrote into us and said, "Hello, bed shitters. I was deeply saddened to hear the news that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 had been canceled. The news coming from Tony Hawk himself. I think it's obvious that after Activision listened to the other studios' ideas, the developers in question probably couldn't find a good enough reason to monetize the shit out of one of their games. Thoughts? Yes, I am grateful for the 1 and 2 remake, which I platinumed, but I still find it a sad state of affairs that such a beloved franchise potentially may not get the remade sequel of the better 2 skateboarding games us fans were yearning for. Here's hoping the rumors of Skate 4 happen next month. All right. Chris, I'm curious what you think. These could have happened and they didn't. Seems like a total mismanagement of resources, although maybe they're just seeing things that behind the scenes that were not, as far as the urgency in them going and working with Blizzard. But this is disappointing news. What do you have to say about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's always sad to me whenever a developer who is doing cool things gets folded into just this big Borg type machinery, just helping this one studio chug along. It sucks. Like, I was really looking forward to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. Like, I was almost certain that it was going to happen, and it looks like they were as well, until they just got folded. It's a bummer, because those are special games, and it was cool. It was really cool to me to see those games do so well after so long, because I remember thinking, like, oh, I don't know, man. Like, I love Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 specifically, but I don't know how big skating really is now. Like, it's a very different time today than it was back when those games were really popping. So to see them come out to, warm reception and people like actually really liking them, that was really nice to see. And it was like really exciting, because I was like, oh, we could be on the cusp of like maybe this resurgence of this IP that was so important to me as a kid, and just to see it die so unceremoniously on the vine before it even really got a shot. It's a huge bummer. And I just don't like this trend of developers who clearly show that they can do really good stuff on their own being sucked into life support systems for bigger games that are so mismanaged that they can't get their own teams to do what they need to do.
I really vibe with this idea that these are important games for the culture of gaming.
Yeah.
And I feel like my brother Dagan is an OG skateboarder and talks a lot about it a lot on Knockback from the mid 80s all the way on. He still rolls his old ass around every once in a while. And he kind of tracks the popularity and the ebb and flow. And I think there's this feeling in skate circles, especially kind of older heads, that Tony Hawk's Pro Skater kind of fed the popularity of the rising 90s X Games feel, the videotape scene. I mean, it's so funny when tapes were the collectible in Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, because I totally related to that, because my brother would come home with these things all the time. And I like skateboarding. I would actually roll around myself even in college, but I never really got the idea of watching tapes and watching it. But my brother was obsessed with this, and I was kind of exposed to this culture. And so I think Tony Hawk's Pro Skater coming out in 99, being followed with a sequel in 2000, and then 2001, and then 2002, they had a nice momentum that I think fed the popularity of skateboarding in the United States and elsewhere in the world, very similar to the effect I think FIFA has had on soccer in places like the United States in particular, where it wouldn't be necessarily as popular, and the rest. So I feel like it's just, from that perspective, it's a bummer. But Dustin, it's also a perspective, a bummer from the perspective of Vicarious Visions themselves. Like, I don't know why you would take a studio that's doing what they do really well and then moving them into support, unless the move is really, listen, Blizzard's kind of struggling and you guys are good and we need you to kind of go and help. But it kneecaps their ability to do other cool things. So I'm curious if you have anything to add on this.
This is extremely disappointing for me, just in that Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 was the one that really I latched onto. I played some of the other ones, but particularly the third one on PlayStation 2, I have so many memories. I remember just being so amazed by all of the fun and like wacky things. There's an awesome level that always sticks out in my mind as the cruise ship on Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 that as soon as that remake was announced, I thought, please let them do 3 and 4 so I can see these levels remade. And so to hear this news is insanely disappointing. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, I just wish, can you just have, if Vicarious Visions is folded into Blizzard, then just have Blizzard make have that team still make it and just have, I mean, I know they're busy. I know it's not that simple, but that's like my dream is like, just figure out a way. These people are still under your umbrella. But I don't know. It makes me wonder too, just like what the sales were like for the 1 and 2 remake. If they weren't,
I think
necessarily...
I think they did appreciably. I'll look while you're talking, but
well, yeah, and clearly they were interested in still doing it outside of Vicarious Visions. But it's one of those things where I feel like it was somewhat the only respectable thing out of this is that they didn't feel like they could find someone else to do it as good. And so they decided to not do it all, which it would have been even more disappointing to get like some kind of half-baked, stinky Tony Hawk Pro Skater 5 version of 3 and 4 remake.
Yeah, Robomoto absolutely murdered the franchise. It's hysterical. Like, because what happened in Neversoft? Didn't they get folded into something too?
They made Guitar Hero and then eventually just
and they went away.
Got folded.
Yeah. So that's right. So I'm reading here with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. Wikipedia says it was the fastest selling game in franchise history, selling 1 million copies in 2 weeks. And in UK, it was the biggest Tony Hawk release since 2003 when Underground came out. So that's appreciable. I don't know if they got a nice return and ROI. I don't see why the ROI is probably a little lower on something like this because of all the licenses in it. However, I think a lot of people were like probably thrilled to be involved in this. I mean, dude, when I was playing it again, because Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 to a lesser extent, but the first one is an iconic game in my own history. That game is Christmas 1999, Rage Against the Machine's Battle of Los Angeles playing in the background. My brother's home. We're playing the shit out of this game. I just remember it so well. And so one of the coolest things about playing the remake, although I didn't play it too extensively, played it for maybe 5 hours, is just all the music. I was like, holy shit, they got all the music. And I'm sure a lot of these, I think they got almost everything except for 4 songs. And I'm sure a lot of the bands were like, we are thrilled to be part of this for, you can pay us $5,000 licensing fee or whatever. But nonetheless, I'm sure it was more expensive to get this game going. But it's available on PS4 and PS5 if people want to check it out, 1 and 2 anyway. Yeah. And yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I got to recommend too, before, if you're a fan of these games or a fan of skating and Tony Hawk in general, there is a HBO documentary that came out like a few months ago. It was this year, called Tony Hawk Until the Wheels Fall Off. And they talk a little bit about the game. And that's, Colin, what you were touching on about how that game, the first one, just hit at the like exact right moment that it was, X Games taking off, Tony Hawk becoming absolutely, I mean, he was huge in the 80s, kind of had not a downfall, but like a big dip in popularity. And then once X Games came off, he like exploded and like just kind of like fed this skateboarding machine. And that documentary is absolutely incredible. I highly recommend it to anybody. It's worth the watch.
By the way, I knew that the Neversoft thing, I was not satisfied with the answer we had. I knew they were folded into Infinity Ward. So I knew that they weren't
Infinity War.
Yeah. I knew that was that they weren't just like broken away because they were too valuable, but they just didn't see a need for that label anymore.
Yeah, they designed a bunch of zombies maps for Call of Duty. I remember because there was like that eye, that famous.
Oh yeah, their eye, the logo.
That eye logo was hidden all over like a specific. I can't remember which game it was, but like a specific zombies incarnation. But I don't know, man. It's just was it 2 or 3 that you could play as like Spider-Man and you could do those web tricks?
That was 4.
That was 4. I was gonna say that was one of the PS2 ones. For sure.
Oh man, that was so sick. That probably couldn't be done now without.
I think you could play as Darth Maul in 3.
Yeah, it was. The game was ridiculous.
There's tons of awesome stuff.
It's funny, man. Like, it's funny. Like, Neversoft. One of their first games was MDK, which is so interesting because MDK 2 was made by BioWare, and that was one of the games that made them popular. And then they made, I don't know if you guys remember, they did a game with Bruce Willis.
Neversoft?
Right before Spider-Man came out. Yeah, called Apocalypse. I don't know if you guys
oh no, I
remember
didn't know
that. It was like some weird ass, like they were making third-person shooters. I mean, MDK was a third-person shooter as well. So yeah, you can go check that out if you want. And then they made, so after that, then they made Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, and they made Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man 1 and 2, Enter Electro.
Okay, let's move on to number 2. Final Fantasy 16 was recently confirmed for release on PlayStation 5 in the summer of 2023, and so it's got a lot of buzz right now. And publisher Square Enix is taking full advantage of the buzz by dispatching the game's executive producer, Naoki Yoshida, to conduct a series of interviews at outlets like IGN, GameSpot, Game Informer, and even the official PlayStation blog. Now, for those who are new to modern Final Fantasy, Yoshida is considered the force behind Final Fantasy XIV's turnaround, growth, and current success, currently acting as that project's director and producer in his role as the stubbornly, obnoxiously named internal developer Creative Business Unit 3. And his game, Final Fantasy XVI, is another departure for the franchise, which has seen its own set of departures from products like Final Fantasy 8, 11, 13, and 15. Final Fantasy 16 is being described as an action RPG, with talent from Capcom's Devil May Cry team helping to hone the feel. And we already know the game's basic plot, which takes place in a world called Valencia. Very Japanese, because STH doesn't belong together like that.
Yeah.
Valencia, which itself is under the dominion of 6 governments. The game focuses heavily on summons, which in this game they call icons. They used to call them eidolons, right, before that? And main characters include names like Clive, Jill, and Joshua. A convenient rundown of the various interviews Yoshida conducted is appearing on Reddit helpfully distills new information. For starters, and perhaps thankfully, the game is an open world. Rather, players will gain access to what sounds like Borderlands-type locations manifesting in a much larger map, not unlike Final Fantasy XII. However, PS5 itself won't have problems loading these various areas, as Yoshida claims the game runs seamlessly into battles, then back to control, into cutscenes, and back again, and so on, with no load times whatsoever. The game also seems to jump time periods. As the aforementioned Clive is the main character, it sounds as you will play as him as a teenager, then again as him in his 20s, and finally as him in his 30s, conceivably broken up by in-game events we may not participate in. He'll be accompanied by party members which are AI controlled. And unusually for this time period in the industry, Final Fantasy XVI is being developed with no DLC in mind and is being positioned to stand on its own, though that doesn't obviously mean that DLC isn't coming. Many players will also be pleased to hear that, similar to what's happening with Dragon Quest XII, Final Fantasy XVI is a mature game going for an M rating. Players will play as both human characters and summons, and the summons are described as their own mini-games. One will play like a shooter, another like a slasher, and another even like a racing title. I was reading today, actually, one will play like a wrestling game. It's totally playable from beginning to end as we speak, and they're working on tightening everything up in the next year leading up to its launch. Final Fantasy, which began in 1987 when Square Enix was still divided from its rival and known as Squaresoft, is the most famous JRPG franchise in gaming history. The last Final Fantasy game, 15, launched on PS4 in 2016. Dustin, let's go to you first. How you feeling about Final Fantasy 16? This is going to be pretty divisive, I think. A lot of this stuff, I think, is going to be is divisive, and I think will continue to be divisive. But I was trying to like kind of say this on Discord to a listener. I didn't really know quite how to put it. I was saying, it's just hard for me to believe that Square Enix is going to spend $200 million on a turn-based role-playing game. Like, I just don't know that they have any other choice. Are they really going to have random encounters and really high-end, but they're standing on opposite sides of each other and they're taking turns fighting? Like, I love that shit. I love that shit to my absolute core. I really do. I think that's Dragon Quest. I think Dragon Quest is going to stay there. I don't know that you can make this expensive, beautiful, impressive turn-based role-playing game. And I think people have to embrace the fact that we're not going to get Final Fantasy 6 or 10 or anything like that ever again from the AAA space in Square Enix. So what do you think about this?
So more and more, I mean, this was already true, but it's becoming increasingly more true that this is my most anticipated game right now, for sure. And it seems like anytime we get new tidbits of information, I'm like, yes, the no open world thing is awesome to me. Just in that 15's open world felt like an open world just so they could be like, it's an open world Final Fantasy game. And then you drive around aimlessly in a car and it's mostly empty. It did not serve the gameplay very well. And so to hear that this is not that is awesome. And the fact that it's already fully playable now, and obviously, I think they said they have more VO work to do, and they have music to do, and they are just polishing this game. That it's one of those that I'm just thinking, like, man, obviously things could still go wrong, and I try not to give anyone the benefit of the doubt in this area, but it's like I just feel like when that game comes out, I'm so excited thinking about like the full complete package, not thinking about the fact that they're not planning DLC right now, that it's been polished for like a year. Like, man, I feel like this is going to be so incredibly awesome. They're targeting, the mature rating, which I think not most, but a lot of Final Fantasy games have been mature, right? Like, I'm trying to think, is 7 Remake mature rated?
I don't know. Final Fantasy ESRB ratings.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I think
all
I've never
the Final
looked at
Fantasy
it.
games with M ratings. All right, so here we go. Final Fantasy Type O or Type 0, Final Fantasy Origin, Final Fantasy 16. Those are the 3.
Really?
Wow.
Okay, so that actually does make that kind of distinct, that this is going to be mature rated, which I think is awesome. I mean, I'm sure that they will. It's not going to be gratuitous, I'm sure, in any way, but who knows? Maybe it will be. That'd be cool too. Whatever. So
Final Fantasy
overall,
15, by the way, is rated T.
15's rated T. That's crazy, because that game, the subject matter gets so dark. The ending of that game is really, really dark and sad. But
it's rated. It says it's rated T for language, mild blood, partial nudity, and violence. And
partial nudity.
A handful of cutscenes depict characters impaled on swords. One cutscene involves a woman being stabbed off screen. Another scene depicts a character with a bloodstained wound. The word shit appears in the dialogue. Characters are depicted topless with breasts that lack discernible details. No nipples.
Unbelievable.
What is World of Final Fantasy rated E for everyone? Dialogue that states, on the one hand, he must... I love reading this shit sometimes. On the one hand, he must flirt with all the ladies. That's one of the things that
on
they
the one hand.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, the last thing I guess I'll say is that I am totally fine this is not turn-based. In fact, I welcome it, because more and more I like turn-based RPGs, but I'm finding more and more that I'm drawn to really good action RPGs. And I think you're right, Colin, and that there is I don't know if market imperative is the right word, but there is definitely like, if we're going to spend this much money on this game, we need to make it appeal to more people. And for many players out there, turn-based is just a full stop. Like, no, I'm not playing that. And that's fine. Everyone has their own tastes. But I guess you could argue that it's like, well, they shouldn't be playing a Final Fantasy game. But again, when you get this kind of budget and this level of like, man, they're taking a year to polish this game, you have to make something more appealing. And I don't know. Personally, I still think that it will be very good despite that. Like, I don't know. There's something about this game that I just feel it's not correct, but I just feel like there's no doubt in my mind that this game's going to be incredible.
I'm with you. I'm totally with you. See, dude, nothing would allow me more pleasure than for them to have said Final Fantasy 16 looks like Octopath Traveler. Straight the fuck up. I would have been like, that is awesome, but it's just never going to happen. Yeah. And so we have to kind of embrace the fact that we'll get the turn. Final Fantasy is just a name. It's not even a series that necessarily means much of anything anymore. I'm sorry, it doesn't. I'm a huge Final Fantasy fan from way back. It's just a series of spells, maybe a few worlds, weapons, summons. That's cool. But
I mean, even the
sequels,
even the sequels don't even really tie into each other. You know what I mean? Like it's
not at all. Yeah, like you have to get sequels within the actual sub number 10-2, 13-2. Those actually touch each other. But you're right. Like, so what I'm saying is that the shit you want is going to continue to come. It's going to come from different sources, and they could have easily been called Final Fantasy 16, but they're not. So I think it's kind of cool because we're getting both. I don't want to necessarily applaud Square Enix for making a decision because we don't know exactly how it's going to go yet, Chris. But I'm curious what you think of this. What do you make of Final Fantasy 16, especially as someone who doesn't have traditional bona fides like maybe Dustin and I do when it comes to our role playing games? You're just not into it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I mean I talked earlier about kind of playing a decent amount of Yakuza Like a Dragon, which is a turn-based RPG, and I actually find myself kind of enamored with it in a way that I typically am not. I spent most of my time playing video games really enamored with action and platformers and the overall idea of like, if I'm playing a video game, I want to be kind of entering a simulated reality where I want to be able to move about as I see fit. I want to be able to go where I want to go. I want to be able to control my character through every single step of the journey. And I don't want to play with menus all the time. Like it was just something that didn't interest me as an ADHD child, and kind of continued to just inform my taste later on. But I find now I'm a lot more comfortable with turn-based as an idea. And I don't know if that's Yakuza's doing necessarily, because I think there have been a couple of other games since then that have kind of grabbed me as well. But I agree with you that there's no way that a game this expensive is going to be turn-based, because it is, for me, for a long time, it really was, I'm not touching that. Like, I'm not going to do that. Was my experience with the original Final Fantasy VII. I was like, I can't. Like, I love the art and I love the music, but I do not find it fun to sit and pick things off of. I remember, like, I had an argument with a friend of mine a long time ago. It's like, what is ostensibly the difference between these types of games and loading up a DVD that plays different animations whenever you click something on the menu? You know, like I that's how I saw it. It was like a glorified DVD menu that was like kind of interactive. I was like, I don't want that. I want to run around and slash shit and do some parkour and like nonsense. Obviously that's really unfair, because it's like boiling down everything. It's like, oh, move around and shoot is every first person shooter. And it's like, obviously things are more complicated, but I do think you are still going to continue to get turn-based games. I think, in fact, it's probably easier than ever for individuals to make them. I think you're going to see probably a hell of a lot of really interesting indie turn-based games and pop out in the next couple of years. But I will say, for this game specifically, I'm not really that into Final Fantasy. This game didn't really catch my attention during the showcase. It didn't do anything that really interested me. And that normally would kind of push me off. But the fact that they said that they're taking a year to polish, that alone kind of has me intrigued. Just because so few games are reliably polished, as we are about to get into, that to hear that a developer is taking the polishing of a game that seriously almost has me inherently supportive of it and curious about it and wanting to check it out. Even as I've been kind of more accepting of turn-based stuff and would have been kind of interested in playing a AAA Final Fantasy that was turn-based at this point. I like the action-oriented gameplay enough, and while I'm not super enamored with whatever the hell is going on in this trailer, I appreciate a game that's taking itself seriously and wants to be good and doesn't fuck around and is taking a whole year to polish. That is a huge selling point to me as somebody who wasn't even really all that into what they were showing. So I'm curious about it. I'll probably check it out, honestly, if that's really the case. But like you said, my experience with Final Fantasy is very, very low compared to you guys.
Let's go into a couple of these questions, Dustin, specifically from the audience here, that will allow us to explore Final Fantasy 16 a little deeper. Max Davis wrote in and said, "Hey fellas, Yoshi P confirmed today that Final Fantasy 16 would have party members joining Clive throughout, but you won't control them in battle," in quotes. What are your thoughts on the solo party member for a mainline game? How do you feel about this? This annoys some people. It doesn't feel very different from Final Fantasy VII Remake to me. In the sense, you can cycle through those characters actively if you want, but you're primarily going to play as Cloud when you play that game. Here, it seems like you'll play as Clive and you'll have some accompanying characters that will be with you. I don't really mind this, especially because if you're going through time in the game over periods of time, and not like Chrono Trigger where you're all going as a party, but this one guy is experiencing different periods of his life, then it doesn't really make sense. I don't like having party members that you just have for a little while and then they go away. That annoys the shit out of me. I like building a party and having choices. So this is different. I mean, this is different for Final Fantasy, there's no doubt, but I think this game is just going to be different, and I'm feeling very optimistic about it as well. How do you feel about, again, Yoshi P saying, quote, party members joining Clive throughout, but you won't control them in battle, unquote?
Yeah, that's totally fine with me. The main thing is just that they join them in battle, you don't control them. So hopefully it just means that the AI is good and not stupid. You know what I mean? As long as it feels natural, like someone's fighting alongside you, then that's totally fine with me. I'm sure, I don't want to say I'm sure, but most likely you will still change out their gear and their stats, and maybe you can tell them to do certain moves, and like that's really all the extent that I would really want to be able to control them. So that's totally fine with me. If that's intended in the game's design, then it's not a problem for me.
Michael Caswell has the other inquiry, Dustin, from Patreon. He says, "Hey, Slitterheads, with the news that Final Fantasy 16 won't be open world, I got to say I'm pretty disappointed. I didn't think it would be, but I hated Final Fantasy 7 Remake. I know you guys loved it, so what do you think of Final Fantasy 16 having the same approach in gameplay?" Michael, I think you are mistaken, and I want to be really clear about this. I don't think Final Fantasy 7 Remake is a good analog for this. Final Fantasy 7 Remake was a chapter-based approach that was very linear. They're saying here that the game is going to be more like Final Fantasy 12, I think. So Final Fantasy 12 is you're confusing open world and non-linear. Those are two different things. And I feel like there's going to be obviously gaps in the story. If the game is really going to be him in his teens, him in his 20s, him in his 30s, then there can't be a non-linear story from stem to stern. It can't be. However, I don't think you're interpreting it quite right. I don't think it's structured in these very stilted chapters where you can't go back and you can't do anything. I don't think it's going to be like that. And so let's not misunderstand, I think, what the intent is. And I was personally, Dustin, thrilled to hear that the game is not truly open world. Yeah. Now, again, the plot's not going to let it be the way we would traditionally, but how many more open world games do we need? I like the Borderlands approach, which is the Final Fantasy 12 approach, which is to say there are these maps that are interconnected to each other. And they're smaller maps, and there's not just this big ass map, but rather locations that you go to. I like that. So do you have anything to add to that, Dustin?
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny because Final Fantasy VII Remake, they remade the city section. I can't remember the name. Midgar. They remade the Midgar part, which if you play the original game, that's like also very linear. It's not until after that part that the game kind of lets you open up with the world map and stuff like that. So it was like, yeah, that's the kind of the intended experience for that. They actually made it more open by having those open instances where you can go out and do side quests. So, whatever. But yeah, I just feel like so many games in particular recently over the last 5 years have just become open world because that's was the buzzword for a long time. And so to see big AAA games realize hey, we don't have to do that. We can do something that is open or feels open and expansive, but we don't need to have it be one totally instanced area. We can kind of make smaller and more dense, more finely crafted areas than just one giant area. It's not necessarily about space. Size isn't everything. It's about how you use it.
That's exactly right.
It's exactly right.
Let's put a period on that. The final story for the week, number 3. It sounds as if beleaguered Electronic Arts' own developer DICE really isn't going to give up on Battlefield 2042 after all. In fact, in a candid interview conducted with website GamesIndustry.biz, the team's newest general manager, Rebecca Kutaz, insists that her studio isn't only intent on fixing Battlefield 2042, but becoming the premier FPS studio it once was known for, or once is known as being. Here's what she had to say in part, quote, "Things are better now. The launch of Battlefield 2042 was not as expected. Our players and community were disappointed, but so was our development team. We have focused on the health of the game, and so bug after bug, patch after patch, we are fixing it and improving it. And each patch we have a little win, and that is important for our team because they were disappointed. We're celebrating 30 years as a studio, but also 20 years on Battlefield. And we have players who have been with us for 20 years, and to disappoint them, that's really hard on us," end quote. Melodrama aside, Kutaz explains some of what DICE has been up to fix the game. And what's perhaps been most interesting about this entire interview is her repeated insistence that DICE is a Battlefield team. Quote, "The team is here to make Battlefield, and they're passionate about Battlefield," end quote. When asked if they should just move on to something new, she noted in part, quote, "No, we couldn't do that to our players, and we couldn't do that to ourselves. I don't want to use the word revenge because it's too strong in English, but we cannot leave it like that," end quote. And she explicitly denies the team will return to Mirror's Edge or anything other than Battlefield, noting that they aren't exactly long on time. Here's what she had to say on this front, quote, "There's no time for anything else, and this is what we want to do. In 3 years, we want to be the first-person shooter powerhouse that DICE deserves to be, and that is what we're going for," end quote. DICE, founded in 1992 and purchased outright by Electronic Arts in 2006, several years after Battlefield began, is no doubt one of EA's most important teams. Its original Battlefield PC game, launched in 2002 as Battlefield 1942, was a game-changing shooter, and they followed it with lots of content. It wasn't until 2005 that PlayStation received Battlefield in the form of Battlefield 2 Modern Combat. 3 years later, Bad Company came to PS3. Its previous 2 Battlefield games are 1 and 5, released on PS4 in 2016 and 2018, respectively. The studio is also the keeper of EA's mega important Frostbite engine, which it is attempting to run virtually all of its games off of in order to keep licensing costs non-existent. Chris, let's go to you. She said something here really interesting to me. She says, quote, "There's no time for anything else, and this is what we want to do. In 3 years, we want to be the first-person shooter powerhouse that this DICE deserves to be," end quote. DICE doesn't deserve shit. DICE has to earn their plaudits. I don't understand what that's supposed to mean.
Yeah.
DICE has dropped the ball in substantial ways. So what do you make about this? I like the insistence on like trying to revive Battlefield and trying to keep with it, but it's surprising that they don't like let them out of that box either. And I like how I totally understand what she means. They have this feeling of revenge, like they just can't leave it alone. It's kind of neat, but yeah, I don't know if it's the best use of time. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know, man. Like it's difficult to say with these types of games because to me, it's always good to see a developer, if they stumble out of the gate and they make something that doesn't meet expectations, or it's colossally underdeveloped, or it misses the mark in some way. It's always a nice story to see that developer stick with it and reform it and reforge it into this thing that becomes, really beloved and really celebrated. It happened with No Man's Sky. It's happened a number of times since. But at the same time, you also have stories like Anthem, where you try, but nothing's sticking, and it's at a certain point it's better to just sort of cut loose and do something else. Maybe not necessarily do something else entirely. I know DICE likes to make Battlefield. I would imagine that if you're trying to work at DICE, chances are you joined the team to try and make Battlefield. Like that is typically what I would imagine you joined the studio to do. It's kind of like how people, when they joined Bethesda, they were like, "Oh man, I can't wait to make a single player RPG." And then they were like, 76. That must have been probably really frustrating for a lot of people who might have joined Bethesda recently. And so I can imagine why they're not eager to get out of the mold of Battlefield, because maybe that's just actually straight up not what they really want to do. Maybe they do just want to make Battlefield, and I can understand why, because there's so much fun that you can have with a game like Battlefield, and so many ideas that you can implement, and so much chaos that you could orchestrate in that sandbox. It's such a strong series with such strong roots. And I'm mixed about it, because I feel like there are certain aspects of Battlefield 2042 that are fucked in a way that goes beyond simply fixing the game. I think there are core design flaws with Battlefield 2042 beyond just the poorly functioning engine, beyond the glitches, beyond the late addition of a scoreboard that conflict with what Battlefield is supposed to be. I feel like this insistence that, you could just pick up whatever gun you want, and you could just you could switch your loadouts on the fly and things like that, where it's like, it's not really what this is. It's not really what Battlefield is about, really. And for people to have abandoned Battlefield 2042 for Battlefield 5 in droves speaks volumes, because Battlefield 5 in and of itself was a massive step down from Battlefield 1. Now, I loved Battlefield 1. Like, and I'm not going to say I have as much of a pedigree with Battlefield as I do with other shooters. Like, I've definitely played more Call of Duties than Battlefield, but I've definitely liked more Battlefields than Call of Duties. Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1943, the arcade game that was on XBLA. I loved Battlefield 1. There was Battlefield Hardline was a bit confusing. I don't know what the hell that was. That was that cops and robbers one. That was a bizarre one. But Bad Company 2, like, these are great experiences, and all of them are very in keeping with what Battlefield is without being carbon copies of the same thing over and over again. And I feel like there's a way to do that with 2042, and maybe to go to the drawing board again. But I don't think they can do that without shutting the game down straight up in the same way that, what was the Final Fantasy one that got shut down and restarted?
Final Fantasy Versus 13.
If you're going to save Battlefield 2042, that is what you have to do. I don't think you really have to go to the drawing board as badly, but there are definitely like core design problems with Battlefield 2042 that cannot be fixed simply by, patching things and letting the game kind of live loosely on life support in that time. You need to really go in and fix these things because it's not just it's unfinished. It's that things are finished in the wrong way. And I don't know. We'll see if they can do it. I would love for Battlefield 2042 to play well because I do think it as a foundation, it's not bad. So I don't know. I don't feel as Anthem about it. I do feel like I do kind of hope that they do put it together. I just don't know if they can. But it's a worthy try, and we'll see how it shakes up.
Do you have anything to add, Dustin?
I was thinking, I don't think so. I think I agree with Chris entirely. DICE, got to do better.
Yeah.
All right, my friends. Let's get into 6 questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, and ideas to end the show as we do each and every week. You can submit these inquiries and more on Patreon. Patreon.com/LastStandMedia. We appreciate you. We already did one of them, so there are 5 left. Rajib Basu wrote in and said, "Hello, fine gents. Would you like to hear?" He said, "Would you?" I think he means would like to hear what you'd like to see from God of War Ragnarok. More of the same, just new locations, enemies, different gameplay mechanics, or playable characters. It's time for a gut check. I want to use this as a gut check. Dustin, when do you think? Let's do it again. God of War Ragnarok is going to come out this date, and it's going to score this score on Metacritic, and people will say what positively and what negatively about it.
It will come out this holiday. Do we need how specific do we want to be?
As specific as you feel like you want to be.
Okay, let's say it's going to come out. It's a made-up game
I made, so you can do whatever you want.
Let's say it's going to come out October. We'll go with that. It will score an 88 because it will suffer from the same sequelitis that Horizon, I think, had. Where I think that saying that it's DLC, like a lot of people said when the trailer came out, is probably unfair. We saw such a small slice of it. But at the same time, we see Sony not necessarily doing anything too bold and different with their sequels and just kind of making them iterative updates on the previous game. For me, what I would really... I feel like the thing that I didn't... or how about I could say that could be improved upon from the first God of War is that I think it comes down to the map and the world. It has this weird thing where it's like there's fast traveling that isn't very good and it feels empty and somewhat linear, but you can go back to places. I'd like to see... I don't want an open world for God of War, but maybe something that is a little more open. Something that makes sense for some side quests and some fast travel that is actually intuitive and not some kind of weird gate system. I'm trying to remember. That was really weird. But
it was bad. The fast travel system sucked in that game.
Yeah. So I'd like to see it get bigger in that direction because I feel like the elements they nailed as far as like the combat was awesome. The different weapons, the way that you upgraded it. It's like I don't necessarily want like a full fine tuning, like statting out Kratos with different numbers and like buffs and stuff like that. But I do like the ability to change different abilities, maybe focus on different areas, kind of fine tune it the way you like. So that's what I'd like to see, but I'm overall expecting an iterative update.
Yeah, it's well, you know what? I won't even answer it. Chris, let's ask you. What do you think the release date will be? As specific as you want to be? What do you think it'll score on Metacritic? And what do you think is a positive and a negative people will say about the game generally?
I think it's going to be November 11th. I'm feeling November 11th for some
Starfield.
reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're going to want to step into like maybe like play it a little cheeky, be like, "Hey, look at that. We got a game out." Also, it's like Also, it's just a good date to release something. It's always nice to have those alliterative dates. There's something appealing about that for marketing executives everywhere. I know everybody salivates over that shit. So I would imagine November 11th. I would actually say I don't disagree with Dustin, but just to kind of make it a little bit interesting, I would bet 80. I would bet it's going to be on the lower end of 80 because I bet I'm going to assume that people are going to be less impressed by the story. I feel like they're going to feel as if the story didn't reach the heights of the first one. But I feel like the gameplay is going to be significantly improved. I feel like they're going to do things that wouldn't have been expected or wouldn't have been possible in God of War 2018. Probably in part due to some of the aerial stuff that we've been seeing, or catching glimpse of, in the few trailers that we have for Ragnarok already. Like there's like grapple mechanics and shit, like with like enemies and stuff, and I feel like that's going to be a huge gameplay improvement over one. But that's kind of how I'm feeling about it broadly.
All right, I'll answer. I'll say I think it will come out in November, but I think they want to get it away from Thanksgiving and Black Friday. So I'll say November 4th, which is the week before November 11th. Gives them enough time to continue to work on the game and go gold in maybe late September or early October, and then have a day one patch ready to go. I think so. The original God of War is 94 or 95 on Metacritic, which is insane. There's no way it's going to get anywhere near that. I would say maybe 10 points lower, something like that, 84. And I think the positives people are going to say it's going to be beautiful. I guarantee you this game is going to be absolutely beautiful on PlayStation 5, especially. And I think what people are going to say is it's more of the same. And we just see that over and over again. If you're going to get Horizon for that shit, then I don't know how God of War is going to escape. And by the way, Chris, if this game scores an 80 on Metacritic, that's going to be a fucking disaster.
Do you think so?
Yeah, that's horrible. You know, this game has been in development. It's a 5-year, $200 million game. You know, you definitely want an 8. So yeah, I don't think it'll. I don't know if what it will do for sales. I think the game's going to sell very healthily, but if they get into that territory, I don't think they're going to be very pleased. I would be very curious to see what their mock reviews say, which I'm sure they already have. So thank you for writing in, Reggie. We'll see soon enough. Hopefully we'll hear soon enough. Slayed by Jay wrote in and said, Sacred Gents. A lot of people wrote in about this, by the way, but I picked you, Slayed by Jay. At risk of beating this topic into the ground, I did feel like the Sacred Symbols feedback regarding The Last of Us Part 1 remake to be one-sided and incomplete. There was very much a focus on the graphical upgrades, and while I agree, it really did not move the needle too much for me in that aspect. I feel compelled, I'm sorry, I can't read, to bring up the fact that Neil also said that they're bringing the gameplay systems from The Last of Us Part 2 into the original as well. To me, that is actually the big news, as The Last of Us Part 2 is, in my opinion, one of the most mechanically impressive games out of the first-party studios. I think that while paired with the updated visuals, it's pretty darn compelling product for new and old players of the franchise. As always, thank you for all that you do, and stay frosty. Thank you, Slayed by Jay, for writing in. A lot of people wrote in about this. So clearly I don't know if we were off the reservation with it, but I think that we have to kind of clarify and maybe go back and talk about this some more. It is true that The Last of Us is getting a major visual overhaul, which we've talked about extensively. It is also true that the game is going to play like The Last of Us Part 2, apparently. Right. And that is in and of itself a major upgrade. However, the big thing that I'm annoyed about with this is just the incessant conversation about the price of the game. I think pricing of games is relevant. I think we can talk about it over and over again. Is it really worth this level of consternation to pay $70 for the game? Like, just don't buy it. You know, that's my whole thing. It's like we don't even really know what we're getting yet. So I think pricing is the hardest thing to judge until after you played it. For instance, we said earlier that the Quarry, in our estimation, is not worth $70, but I couldn't have known that until I played it and bought it for $70 and then felt the so Chris, let's go to you first. I feel like a lot of the conversation around The Last of Us Part 2 is missing the forest for the trees, I think. So let's actually try to focus in on that, which is, do you feel like the mechanical gameplay of The Last of Us Part 2, which is well above what's in the original Last of Us? If people haven't played the 2 and recently, just go watch some gameplay and you can even tell how different it is. Do you think that in and of itself is another value proposition for the game to make it play more in line with the superior sequel?
I mean, I it's definitely an improvement. I don't know how much though, like, because it is ultimately, I don't know, this, I feel like this is going to feel like Last of Us 2 DLC, like, ultimately is what it's going to feel like, because if it's just lifting the systems, then the only thing that I can really remember being that different about Last of Us 1 and 2 is the fact that, like, your hits, like, whenever you hit somebody, it felt a little bit more weighty, and it was just, like, more violent. But, like, as a control setup standpoint goes, like, it's not really insanely different. It's just more impactful and does a better job of serving the experience of, like, oh, the violence is real and visceral. So to me, it's like, I was fully aware of, you know, that's what they were planning to do. I just don't know if The Last of Us is just not it's not a gameplay game to me. It's a story, it's a narrative adventure to me. Like, the gameplay is fine and it does a good job of servicing it, but, like, I don't think anybody, even back when The Last of Us 1 was, like, the talk of the town, I don't think anybody was really talking about The Last of Us 1 as if it was breaking new ground for gameplay. You know, like, it's not one of those games. It was breaking new grounds because for presentation, for production value, for story, for narrative. And that was important at the time, and it still is. Obviously, it's why these first-party games sell so well. It's because so many of them have adopted that kind of philosophy. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's just, I feel like the gameplay is an improvement, and it is probably going to be very, very transformative to the overall game experience. I do think it'll lead for a game that does play better, because as The Last of Us 2 did play better. But I just feel like my worry with The Last of Us 1 remake from the get-go has always been, a game is like a house of cards, and everything is meticulously placed in such a way, and there's intent behind the placing of these cards in that particular way. But the second that intent leaves and is interpreted by somebody else, then it becomes something else. You know, like, it becomes, oh, I really appreciate this game because it's washed out. Like, it's, for me, like, I love Resident Evil 4 because I find the fact that it's so washed out so compelling. I feel like it serves the nature of the kind of game it is, that there is such a lack of color, that it does feel almost like there's almost like a faded photograph type of experience to playing Resident Evil 4, especially on original hardware at the time. To the point where, like, if you do take that and you do make it look better, it does look better, but there's a chance that it loses something. And there's also something like that I feel that same way about some of the character redesigns. We talked earlier about, not earlier, but like in a previous episode, about how Ellie looks older. And that has, you know, that's a minor change up front, because on its face value, that's just a texture swap or a model swap, which is not really that big of a deal. It's not difficult to explain to someone. But on an interpretive level, that could have drastic impacts on how that game is interpreted and how that game is received by your average player. Little things, like every little thing from character design to lighting of certain scenes to the time of day in certain locations to the voice actors that you use for certain people, like, that all contributes to the experience that you had with the original. And I don't know if putting it all on the line to kind of, like, give this game a boost in every single way is worth the potential fumbling of the important piece of media that is the original Last of Us. That's always been my thing. That's not everybody's argument, and I understand, you know, people love that game, and I know people are going to pay for it, obviously, especially on PC where it's never been available. I think Sony is smart to do it, but I just don't find it to be particularly necessary, personally. I've also been rambling, so I'll let you guys take.
No, I mean, there is no time limit. Say whatever you need to say. Sure. No big deal at all. Dustin, do you have anything to add about The Last of Us? And, you know, I feel like I wanted to bring it up because typically when a number of people write in, and I want to say 6 or 8 people wrote in about this on our thread of 160 comments or something, that I was like, okay, well, this is something clearly that's not going through, we're going to be talking about for a while. I fear the discourse about this game. I on one hand, I'm very excited to play it on September 2nd. I'm going to play the shit out of this game on PS5, no doubt. And can't wait to see the trophy list, can't wait to see the updates, all the rest. But I fear the discourse. I feel like the discourse around PlayStation games right now is a little broken. We're going to talk about that in the next comment as well, and how it compares to its competitor. But I also think that the discourse around The Last of Us is just kind of fucked since 2020.
Yeah.
So what do you think of it?
So the main thing that I want to comment on, just because I've seen people write in about this and you brought it up briefly, is this price aspect. And we'll leave it at this, just since I'm sure will come up again. And like you said, the discourse in this game is going to be annoying. To me, it's complicated just in that I feel like it's a specific instance with this game where I spent full price when the game came out on PlayStation 3. And then a year later, it was a bit of a hard sell, but I bought it again for full price with a little bit more content with the DLC on PS4 remastered. And so from a personal perspective and like thinking about what personal value I'll get out of it, it's hard to stomach paying for this game again with these upgrades when you think about other stuff that Sony's, like, think about the Uncharted collection that was $60 at launch and you got 3 games. Like, and I know that those weren't fully remade, but it's one of the, and I brought this up last week too, is that this is technically less content as well because it doesn't include any kind of multiplayer mode. And it's like, not even that I would really want that, but it's just, I think it's something to keep in mind. And ultimately, it is going to come down. The value is always, it always has been and always will be in the eye of the beholder. That if it's like, yes, this is my favorite game ever, I don't care that it is technically less, because the value to me is in the remake and the better gameplay improvements and all of that stuff. Right. So yeah. So for Colin, it's worth $70, and that's totally fine.
My God,
for me, it's just
that to me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a hard justification when I'm like, I've seen these story beats before, and the fact that it's in 4K with better character models is, I feel like I'm satiated in that, right? So it's like, it comes back to that argument about, is it a necessary remake? And that is, again, one of those things that is going to be in the eye of the beholder. So
yeah,
I don't know. We'll forget what I said on this podcast by the time we hit stop recording. So I don't remember how definitive I was about, like, maybe I was overly definitive about this, like, being unnecessary or not worth it. And so maybe that's how I've changed a little bit. It's just like, you know, if this is what you want, like, cool. I'm happy for you that you'll be able to get this, like, one of your favorite games or whatever, and be able to get that in this new awesome way. But for me personally, I've had enough. I've feel like I've spent enough, and I've seen this story enough that getting this level into, like, getting this much back for that price is personally not worth it for me. And I know that there's many people that agree. That's been kind of the interesting thing, is that I've been getting, not I specifically, but people, you know, there are people that are staunchly for, like, yes, obviously, like, Chris must be blind that he can't see the difference. There are some people being quite rude.
Well, look. Yeah. I will say, like, when I said I can't see the difference, it wasn't necessarily literal. I think I was talking about more, and I've explained this before, but I'm not talking about, like, I can't tell which one is different. Like, I can tell they're both different. For me, in certain screenshots, I had trouble discerning which one was supposed to be better.
Yeah, I understand.
Because style is a lot of character modeling and a lot of art design is style. And to me, like, I like the style of the original. So when I see the new one and it does look more realistic, you know, and it's objectively better character models, surely. Like, that's objectively true. But I look at, you know, Ellie side by side with the original, and I can't help but just think the original one does look better. And it's not even because I have, like, a nostalgic attachment to it, because I don't really. It's just there's a style there that is present that is absent from the new one. And that's intentional, because it's meant to mimic the style of the new one, which is, you know, more gritty and more down to earth and more real. And I get that. But there are obvious ones. Like, there's one of a clicker that's, like, obviously the old one is worse. You know,
right.
Like, it's like, there's no question. It's obviously a better thing. But to me, I'm always going to be of the camp of, you know, just because something is technically better doesn't necessarily mean that is the subjective assessment. Like I think PS1 Polygon Crash is the best looking Crash because he just looks ridiculous. Because he just looks as absurd. He looks as absurd as his games suggest. So as much better of a character model as the Insane Trilogy model of Crash is, I find that it lacks a certain edge and it lacks a certain style and a certain silliness that was there by necessity of older hardware. That's not the case with The Last of Us because obviously that hardware was weaker but still capable of doing a well enough job. But it's entirely subjective, you know, like it's all art design and preferences. So,
and I think too, something that is worth bringing up, there was a big conversation around Naughty Dog posted the tweet that was like Tess glow up, and it showed the character Tess in the old version and this new remake. And of course there was drama around this because there are some people that are like, oh, she looks old now. And there was like the joke about like gamers only wanting like the females to be young, hot, and beautiful or whatever. And I'm like, that's not, there are those people out there, of course. But for me, when I saw this, I'm like, that just doesn't look like that character to me. Like they changed the way she looks. And that is weird because that's not how, like when I see her, I'm like, that kind of looks like a different person in some ways. And it like almost was like disconnecting in some ways. And so, again, that's not going to bother everybody. But I don't know. I don't know where I'm at with this anymore. Teach their own. That was my main point.
All right, I want to read this next one. It's long. I usually don't like these long ones, but I did want to read it. Got a few thumbs up and people were interested in it. Bix Hutch wrote in, said, "Hey, Colin. My question is mostly for you, but I'd like to hear what the other guys think as well. In your last episode, you unknowingly admitted not just your bias, but the gaming media as a whole's bias against Xbox towards PlayStation. When speaking about the Tomb Raider exclusivity, you mentioned how the entire media was up in arms and grabbed the torches and pitchforks to pry the information on exclusivity out of Xbox, to which they folded pretty quickly. I remember those days very well, as they were brutally even go online at all as an Xbox fan. I'm wondering where the explosive outrage went for the Final Fantasy VII Remake. I think a little context is due before digging any further. Final Fantasy VII Remake was announced as a time exclusive. The boxes and stores even came attached with a sticker stating the exclusivity was 1 year. Multiple online storefronts accidentally displayed the Xbox box art, and GameStop employees have said that they saw promotional materials with Xbox support listed. Now, I say all that because after 2 years in pure silence from Square Enix and Sony, the media has said nothing. There has been no outrage or media support for millions of fans who have never been told that they will or won't get the game on the system they prefer. These double standards happen frequently in the eyes of Xbox fans. I've noticed over the years that much like conservatives in politics, that Xbox gamers have turned away from the media and shifted to online personalities. Conservative commentators such as Ben Shapiro, Candace Owen, and your friend David Rubin have gained massive followings that dwarf even cable networks due to conservatives feeling like they don't have a voice in American media. I see Xbox fans taking the same route with guys like Colt Eastwood, Jess Gordon, the Iron Lords, Rand L. Thor, I think I'm saying that right, and our beloved Maddie and Cog. Maddie recently said he believes Xbox gamers are more harshly criticized, and it's an ongoing topic in the Xbox community, so it's been on my mind a lot lately. As a gamer that supports all consoles, and the PS1 is my favorite console of all time, the different treatment is glaring to me. There are many other instances I could mention, but since it came up on your podcast, I figured I'd use that. So what do you think, Colin and crew? Do you see it at all, or is the Xbox army a bunch of crazy people? I thought this was interesting because I wanted to bring up a few things that I think are important. Mm-hmm. First, Bix, you're saying that no one had brought up this Final Fantasy VII Remake date shit. That's bullshit. Isn't it? I mean, isn't it? Because I've said it a million times on this show. Yeah, something's up with this game. Yeah. Something's up with this game. It's past its date. It's supposed to be on Xbox already. I think I've said it 55,000 times on the show. So I don't know if you want me to be like upset that it's not happened, but I've brought it up. It's obvious that something has happened. And I think it's obvious that Sony has just gone and money-hatted Final Fantasy stuff in an even more drastic way than they already had. I would assume Final Fantasy 16 might have been like a timed exclusive similarly, and that might just be a straight up second-party exclusive now. Or third-party exclusive now. I don't really know. But I kind of take issue with that characterization, at least of our show, because it does come up. We do bring that up. I have said that was weird. And I don't really dig the Tomb Raider comparison because we've talked about Rise of the Tomb Raider. We were making fun of that in the moment at the time, 7 years ago, whenever it was, because they were totally dodgy about it in the moment. You're talking about how all of the promotional material for Final Fantasy VII Remake had a date, like it's 1 year from now. It did, and then the situation changed, and we don't know anything about that. But the same situation existed for Xbox, and they refused to say it until someone twisted their arm and made them submit. That's different. So I think that that's just two different things. However, I wanted to say this about the hardcore Xbox fans. We have lots of Xbox fans that listen to the show. There seems to be... Well, let me back up. As a PlayStation podcast, I don't really get a lot of the negative PlayStation stuff that I'm sure happens. Like, it's not directed at me. It's not going to be directed at me. You know, they're not going to direct it at the dude with 130 platinum trophies who plays all the first and second party games that come out and stuff and does the world's most famous PlayStation podcast. They're not really going to come after me. So I get that. But the inverse is not true. And I deal with a lot of Xbox people in my comments, in my DMs, and whatever, that are pretty hostile and harsh to me. And I think what this brings out is, why do you care so much? That's kind of what I'm wondering. People always ask me, like, why are you always talking about this? Why are you always talking about that on the show? Why does it matter so much to you? And it's because I'm an analyst, genius. That's why it matters to me. I'm an analyst of the industry. I've been for 20 years. So when something's happening or something isn't happening, it's going to be of great interest to me, and I'm going to talk about it. The next subsequent question you need to then ask yourself in return is, why do you care so much what I have to say? I think some people are obsessed with it. And it's interesting.
They clip it out and put it on Twitter. It's
like I have that much power over you. Just saying whatever has that much power over you. I think that's a great compliment to me. And I'm not saying you, Bix. I'm saying the royal you, of course. I do agree that Xbox has created this really interesting ecosystem of people that are creating content. In fact, all the people you mentioned, I think, have been on Defining Duke. Yeah. And that's our Xbox podcast. And they all do their own thing. I think here's my interpretation of the Xbox fandom generally, is that it seems to be more a fan base about a way of buying games as opposed to a fan base that plays games. Because and I'm not saying that Xbox fans don't play games. What I mean by that is PlayStation fandom about first and second party fandom seems to be around the different IP, the licenses, and the 2 or 3 or 4 games we get every year. And the argument and conversation constantly with Xbox fans seems to be about Game Pass. And so these are just two different things. I don't give a flying fuck about subscription services. We were just talking earlier how, like, I just don't want to get PlayStation Plus Premiere, whatever the hell it's called. I don't want it. And so it's hard for me to kind of vibe with a hardcore fan base that seems to be whose fandom seems to surround a subscription. That to me is hard for me to grapple with, because my fandom in games surrounds games. And so that, I think, is just a segment of what I've experienced. But like I said at the top, I'm sure vibrant and vehement negativity that comes out of the PlayStation ecosystem, those cannons aren't directed at me. So I'm not going to pretend that it's really any different. But that's my observation, is that I see the passion. I see all the different people cropped up. And I think that I think Xbox's ecosystem is just developing differently. It's about access to games. It's about the ability to get these games cheaply, to hold on to them in the subscription service. And there's a passion for that, and I respect that. But it's not a passion that I share. My passion is for games, like the games themselves and the industry itself and the stories of the industry and the developers. I couldn't care less about paying for them. I'm happy to pay for my games. So, and for people that don't listen to the show regularly or don't know, we don't get any games early. We pay for all of our games, just like you. So that's kind of what I have to say about that. I think no, I don't think Xbox people are you said, our Xbox army a bunch of crazy people? No. They seem like a pretty passionate group of people, but the ones that interact with me in the most vile way, I'm confused why they care so much about what I have to say. That's interesting to me. And right. I think some people think it's like, well, they're clipping you out and making fun of you and all of this. And I'm like, that's fine. And we want to kind of nip that in the bud when it's unfair. But otherwise, it's kind of a compliment that, you want to hear what the PlayStation podcast has to say. I don't know. So that's kind of that's my take. Chris, you have anything to add?
I don't know. I think it's a different style. I don't think necessarily that the passion is about the subscription service. I think there is a passion for it, but I don't think that necessarily precludes, like, because there are people who are wondering, like, where the hell's Fable? You know, like that was the big conversation about this last showcase, where it's like people are awaiting in that community for very specific games from very specific developers.
Right. So, no, I hate to interrupt. I want to just make sure I'm clear. I'm talking simply about a vocal subsection.
Oh,
of Xbox
right.
fans.
Right. Yeah.
Not all Xbox fans, of course.
No, yeah, of course.
No, I'm sure there are plenty of people that are confused of where all the games are as well.
Yeah, and
so I want to make sure I'm not painting with a broad brush. I'm simply talking to Bix Hutch's segment of the Xbox army that seems to be most vocal. That seems to be a cult of personality that surrounds Game Pass.
But yeah. No, you're not wrong. But I think for me, like, my assessment of the perceived bias really just comes down to grandfathering, you know, where, like, to me it's like, Nintendo's been around the longest, so they have the most amount of just sheer intrinsic, like, oh, we love this even though it's fine, you know, like it's like there's a lot of forgiveness levied towards Nintendo because so many associate their childhoods with Nintendo. They've been around for so long, they're synonymous with video games. Like, even when I got my PS1, my grandmother called it a Nintendo. You know, like, that's how synonymous they are. They're like Band-Aids. You know, they just like they own
Kleenex.
And that's changed in recent years, but they still have that pedigree of, like, you know, yeah, here's our 98th Mario game. And you love it because it's Mario and it's what you know, and it's like maybe like a slightly different twist on what you know, but it's mostly what you know and what you love, and that's fine. And that they've developed their ecosystem around that. Then you have PlayStation coming in a little bit later, right? And they, because they're kind of like the middle child, they get it kind of both ways, where they, you know, there's a lot of bias in favor of PlayStation exclusives, specifically just based on presentation alone. Like, if a game plays poorly but looks really good, there's a lot of people who are going to come out to defend it. Not to say that that's exclusive to PlayStation, but it happens. And you also have people who are like, oh, what the fuck are these guys? Pretentious, you know, like third person over the shoulder game over and over and over again, which again is not an invalid criticism either. Then you have Xbox, which is, as far as like the big three, the newer kid on the block. Gaming's old enough now that all of these guys have been around a long time, so you see a lot less of it in general, but they are the new kids on the block, so to speak. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter how good Sea of Thieves actually is. You know, it's always going to be like, that's that Rare game. Like, what are they doing with Rare? And it's like, they're making this incredible, thriving, like, sandbox that is insane, you know? And, you know, I feel like it goes that way. And you can even see it, by the way, when new things crop up. The second Stadia happened, as objectively bad of an idea as that was, everyone shit all over it because it was new. It was the new kid on the block relative to the rest of them. And I think that's just like, I think history favors that which is just too old to remember accurately. I feel like is almost part of it, where it's like, you know, we revere certain figures because they're old enough now that they're so separate from a person. You know, like,
no, you're absolutely right.
You know what I mean?
And what's ironic about what you're saying too is that we're so, like you said, with the distance, PlayStation 1 came out in December 1994 in Japan, right? Mm-hmm. Xbox came out in November 2001. They're not that separate in terms of time, because we're in 2022.
And the NES wasn't even that far. It was like, what, 9 years before the PS1?
Right. That's exactly right.
They're not really that far apart, but they feel further apart than they are.
Indeed. That's very well said. Dustin, do you have anything to add about this conversation about, you know, fandom and Xbox fans, the so-called Xbox army? Do you think they're a bunch of crazy people? I mean, I personally don't. I think I just get a lot of negativity that wouldn't be directed at an Xbox podcast, right?
Right. But, and I'm sure that those guys, the different Xbox commentators that were mentioned in that comment, I'm sure they get the crazy PlayStation people sending the same type of messages that you get. Yeah. So there's always crazies on all sides. When it comes to this conversation about Rise of the Tomb Raider and the weird exclusivity stuff, I think it's important. and I want to say this, I want to make sure, Colin, I'm sure you will know this, but as far as I can tell, Sony hasn't paid for a direct sequel to be a timed exclusive. Now, some will argue it's like, well, Final Fantasy was on Xbox and now it's not, which I understand it is. It's a numbered sequel, but it's not a direct story
I understand
sequel.
what you're saying. That sounds right. I'd have to.
So yeah. I can understand the frustration of PlayStation fans at that time being like, what the fuck? This was a multi-platform game. I'm invested in this story, and now you're just paying to keep it away. So I understand why that happened at that moment. I'm not trying to justify or whatever. I'm just adding context. As far as I think that there is some truth that it's like, yeah, no one is causing an outrage about Final Fantasy VII Remake, other than probably a select few, and some, I'm not saying they don't exist, but some of them are wondering where that game is. And the reality is just that people play Japanese games on PlayStation, by and large, overall. And yeah, I think it's cool that Xbox is trying to get a footing in Japan, specifically with, well, maybe not a footing in Japan, but getting Japanese games on Xbox. I think that that's great for them to add more types of games to their platform. It's cool. I'm glad. I'm like legitimate. I'm so glad that Xbox fans will be able to play Persona and that they'll be able to play it with no cost to entry on Game Pass. That gets more people into that fandom, which is good for me as a fan of Persona. But if you want to explain the reasoning of why there's no outrage, is that the hardcore Final Fantasy fans that wanted to play Remake got a PlayStation to play it when they've already played it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and same with so it's a different situation where it's like, okay, we're taking away a direct story sequel, and we're making a sequel, or we're making a game that the fan base is already primarily on PlayStation, and by the time that the exclusivity would be up, all the people that really want to play it found a way to do it.
I feel like a more compelling comparison, although not exactly, because there's a bunch of legal reasons why it's not entirely the same. But I remember feeling a certain type of way when Spider-Man was a PlayStation exclusive, because I remember feeling like that was particularly weird because that character is so ubiquitous, and I remember being like, that's such a strange. That almost is an annoying choice. Obviously, it's because Insomniac is working on it, and there's obviously like a deal like that. It's not like that doesn't make sense to me, but I remember at the time being like, this feels like it should be on more places that is typical. Because like, I don't think there has ever been a Spider-Man exclusive game before that. Like, I don't think that ever happened. Like, ever. Like not
of any consequence.
Yeah, like even like the Neversoft Spider-Man games, those were on PS1 and Nintendo 64. And I remember because the 64 version had those stupid freeze frame cutscenes because they couldn't afford to animate.
Yeah, there was no memory in those.
Yeah.
Well, and I just when it comes to those fandoms like that, like I get the frustration if you're a big Spider-Man fan and it's like, well, Sony came in and made a deal and now you can't play it. It's like, well, they also paid for it and funded it. So it's like,
obviously.
That's their, and I know you're not saying that, but I know that there are people out there that are like, Sony kept Spider-Man away from other consoles. I'm like, they made it happen. They paid for it. So yeah, of course. And it's like, when Xbox pays for this Indiana Jones game and makes it happen, then I would expect it to be exclusive on that platform, even though I'm sure there's a shit ton of Indiana Jones fans.
That's also on apparently maybe not exclusive. I don't know if you guys have been seeing that, which is really interesting. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know for sure. I think it was Jez that said that. I could be wrong though.
Interesting.
We'll see.
But I actually was going to end with this, but I wanted to, well, I'll go to this one next because it kind of connects with the one I want to say next, which is it's from James Hill. He says, "Hey, Chris, Colin, and Mr. Steal Your Wife.
Oh,
is it me or are gamers getting burnt out? The most recent examples I can think of are the discussions around Starfield and The Last of Us Part 1. The gaming collective is feeling pretty negative about both games. Seems like the consensus is Starfield seems too big for its own good, and whatever work was done on The Last of Us Part 1, it's not worth the $70 price tag. Are gamers finally fed up being burnt by false promises by devs and big corpo pricing gouging its audience?" Thanks for writing in, James. So this kind of connects to what I wanted to say here, because I do feel like there's a general, if I might be Jimmy Carter for a minute, there's a general malaise over gaming right now. I feel that the gap in releases has given enthusiasts room to wander a little bit too much. And when you're wandering like we are right now, kind of from scarce game to scarce game, I think that it just creates a lot of annoyance amongst people because we want to be here. And this is kind of goes into what I was saying. Like, why do you care so much about what people say about games you like? Is we're ultimately here to play games, but there's just not very many of them right now. So all we have to do is prognosticate about what is to be and wax nostalgically about what already was. And so to James's question, I feel like it's not about getting burnt by false promises. It's simply, and I don't think it's price gouging either. I really don't think most people give a flying fuck about paying $70 for a game. I think it's totally incidental to a lot of people. It's $10 more than you're paying for the game for the last 15 years. I mean, is that big of a deal? I don't think it's that. I think it's that people just don't have any games to play. So they're just looking for things to complain about. And you know what this feels a lot like? And I know you guys remember it, and I was certainly there, is it just feels like the old games industry. Like, people are like, this negativity is out of nowhere. And I'm like, it kind of feels like the old industry, because back in the day, if you were a GameCube fan in like 2003, for instance, you probably had, I don't know, 5 releases of a quarter, you know, for probably 2 of those quarters. Like, there was nothing to do. So what did you do? You went on GameFAQs and you fucking complained, and you had huge 10,000 thread Zelda art, you know, things going on. And you had, but that, when we came out, a lot of that negativity went away because everyone was back with Nintendo again, and there was things to do and things to play. And then when that started to wane again, then people were anti-Nintendo, and then people. So what I'm saying is, there are gaps in games, and I think it's most pronounced on Xbox, and that is why I think maybe the angst is greatest there. That's the connection I can make to that. Does that resonate with you at all, Chris?
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think especially with, you know, the way they kind of mismanaged their biggest IP, you know, I feel like that also lends to just like the general kind of like, what the fuck is going on? But generally, I think you're right. I don't think this is necessarily out of nowhere. This we've had periods like this several times that I can remember anyway. And it's different for everybody depending on which ecosystem you're in. You know what I mean? Like, certain years, you know, like you were talking about GameCube in that time. It's like, I remember on Xbox, it was like it was around 2011 to 2013, and then like that persisted into the Xbox One. I mean, you had like some reprieves with like Sunset Overdrive, and, you know, I enjoyed Quantum Break, but like, I mean, that whole generation was just like, what the fuck is going on? And the way they fumbled the Master Chief Collection, and it didn't work for 6 years, feels like, you know, it was a mess, you know. So the malaise over there has been insane, and I actually do think that long period of time kind of led to the relative positivity in that sphere right now. Just to see Sea of Thieves come into its own, and to see Game Pass flourishing, and to see like all of these, you know, even Halo Infinite, for as like much of a disaster as that is, of the 3 first-person shooter big league hitters that came out that year, it was the best one, which is, you know, it doesn't say much for those other ones, but, you know, you take your victories where you can when you're in certain places.
I agree. And I also think that it's just from an outsider's perspective about Xbox, it's like, if I were an Xbox content creator, I'd be pretty amped right now, because even though there's a dearth of games, Dustin, there's like a lot of things to talk about. Like, there's a lot of mysteries to unravel. I'd be pretty into the weeds right now. I'd be wondering, where are these games? What has gone wrong? What has missed? Why can't the quality that we've had with Xbox Live and with the console and the controller and all the things that we do right, why can't we get the first and second party games out? The mystery abounds, and I'd be amped about that. I mean, I wouldn't be amped as an Xbox player, but I'd be amped as an Xbox content creator.
Right.
But do you feel that there's a general malaise amongst gamers right now as well, of all types? I do feel like there is. I just feel like it comes from a lack of distraction, and we were flooded with games for several years, and I just think now we wait, and it sucks. But what do you do when you wait? You get bored, and then you start getting agitated.
Yeah, I think there's some of that, and I think there's some of like, we have these new consoles, and with new consoles we expect new experiences, and we really haven't gotten that. Ironically, one of the best quote unquote new experiences, which is only kind of half that, is Elden Ring, and that's really been kind of rallied around and become this like water cooler game, and that's not even a current a PS5 or Series X only game. That's also came out on last gen as well. So I think there is some of that where you also just have a lot of games that are playing it safe. Like there's a lot of like imperative from publishers to make safe games, and eventually like you kind of hit a wall with that. And it's funny because we see, I think it's funny when you see companies like kind of do something good and reinvent themselves, but then just do that reinvented thing then over and over. You saw that with Assassin's Creed, that they kind of like hit a wall and then they took a little bit of time off and they came back with Origins. They're like, people are like, this is great. And then they did it again with Valhalla, and now people are like, nope, never mind. This actually feels like it was like, okay, Valhalla was too much then of that new take on Assassin's Creed or whatever. And so it's funny because I've seen people now, they're like, man, I miss the old style of Assassin's Creed games. It's like, it's like you almost got to like cycle things in and out or something like that. But I think that as we see the COVID, after we get past this, like, I don't know, we're seeing less games right now because the COVID delays and stuff like that. I think once we get out of this and get out of this cross-gen period and allow developers to take things to the next level, we see Unreal 5 kind of finally, it's out now, and now we just need to see these games actually come to fruition and come out, that we will hopefully start to see more excitement. But I don't know, maybe that's me being optimistic because I said, there is that market imperative to make games that are same or safe. But I don't know, there's always counters, like look at Elden Ring, look at how that took something that on the books should not have been this critical success. I mean, it had some critical success written on it or commercial success because it's a From Software game, but not to that extent. And so I just hope developers make publishers see that, and it's like, look, we can do stuff that isn't necessarily cookie cutter, and if we do it right and take time and care and attention to it, that we can be rewarded for that. But it's always a risk.
Yeah. Instead, you got wacky first-person shooters constantly coming out that you're just like, who the fuck?
X-Defiant.
Love it.
Well, that's the ironic part, is that if you make the game that's too safe or too safe on paper, then it just ends up being like everything else. And it was like, well, that wasn't worth it either. It's like, you got to find some kind of middle ground, or at least push one direction.
We need more Balan Wonder Worlds.
Yeah, Balan Wonderworld was bold and different. At least it had that going for it, but too bad.
Balan Wonderworld's better than no Wonderworlds. And
yeah,
I feel like, there's a little bit of a self-irony that needs to be identified here too. Like, why are we talking about this so extensively right now? Because there's nothing else to talk about.
Yeah.
So I digress. The final inquiry comes from Chimpanzee Blaze Oil. It says, good afternoon, you beautiful slitterheads. This question is mostly for Chris, but feel free to chime in, Colin and Dustin. A couple of weeks ago, Chris commented his dream game was one where you could fly a spaceship, land on a planet, get out, and engage in FPS gameplay. This game exists, kind of. Have you looked into Star Citizen? I'm aware of the controversy around it, but as an avid player, there's a lot to like. The FPS gameplay is decent, mining, bounty hunting, and exploration is a ton of fun, and ship combat is really fantastic. As it's still an alpha, it requires some patience and it's a bit obtuse, but I still find myself in awe of the game regularly. Maybe give it a look sometime. So, of course, he's talking about Star Citizen, which comes from Cloud Imperium Games. It's not technically out yet. And, of course, it's the brainchild of Chris Roberts, who goes all the way back to Richard Garriott and Origin Systems and the Ultima games. And, of course, he was best known for Wing Commander. So this is like his first project in basically this century of any consequence. But it's raised an eye-watering $400 million in crowdfunding, and it's just insanity. I don't understand. I look at videos of it every once in a while, and I'm like, it's cool, but I don't really understand what the intent is here and where this money is going. Is this a game that's interesting to you? Is that doesn't scratch the itch that you were talking about?
No, because I think he boiled down my initial desire a little bit too much. Like, he says, like, oh, my dream game is one that you could fly a spaceship, land on a planet, engage in FPS gameplay. That's not what I'm talking about. My dream game is you're flying around and it's No Man's Sky, and then you land and you get out and it's Destiny. Specifically. Like, everything that both of those games entail mixed together into the same thing. I want to fly to Mars, land, jump out, and do a raid, with a bunch of other space wizards and fucking cloaked, awoken hunters in the middle of like a computer's brain. It's not just, fly around, get out, and shoot a thing. Anybody can do that. I mean, like we're technically going to get that in Starfield. It's not necessarily that in and of itself is the design that I want. It's more so everything that Destiny does right mixed with everything that No Man's Sky does so well. I feel like that would be like just such a great game for me personally, because it's everything that I love. It's sci-fi, it's magic, it's resource management, it's proper, like really well designed FPS combat. It's well defined loot. It's cool lore. That isn't really encapsulated in you fly a ship and you engage in FPS gameplay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, Star Citizen is a great mystery to me. Do you have anything to add, Dustin?
I'm intrigued about this game, and I've seen clips that look cool, but I don't want to play a game that isn't done yet. And that includes Star Citizen. So I will check it out when it's ready.
This game will never be done.
Yeah.
I do wonder when the shit or get off the pot moment really comes for them, because they haven't sold anything really. I mean, it's all just buying in-game items, I think, and crowdfunding. I do wonder if the game can meet its goals, but the longer you leave these things in the oven, the games industry just moves too quickly. It's not like movies or something where a great film in the 60s is going to be a great film today. It's totally different. So we'll see what happens there. But I agree with you, Dustin, Chris, that this idea of like a Destiny 2 shooter, I mean, this is more like what EVE Online was trying to be connected with Dust 514, and that would be much more interesting. So we'll keep an eye out for these and similar ambitious games. Maybe it'll come to PlayStation if it ever launches. But that's all we have for this episode of Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. Let's just end with closing comments. Dustin, closing comments from you first.
Closing comments. Looking forward to seeing some of you at Too Many Games. I've never been to this convention before. I know it's more retro focused, which is very cool. And I know there's some other stuff there. So as always, if you see us there, which Ben and I, and Dagan will be there as well. He'll be on the show floor, so he'll be elusive. Yeah. You can try to find him. I think he's going to be there Saturday. If you see us, please feel free to say hi, and we can, chat for a bit. So should be fun.
Cool, man. And Chris, closing comments.
I don't know, man. I'm going to be heading over to Anaheim in a little bit. So.
Oh yeah, VidCon. I haven't been to Anaheim since VidCon 2014. I think was the last time I went.
I'm already so tired because it's so hot here.
I know. Gross. Well, have fun. Be safe.
Yeah.
And thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Sacred Symbols and Last Stand Media. Patreon.com/Last Stand Media. Could not do it without your support there. And of course, find us on podcast services, YouTube, etc. if you'd like to as well. Leave us nice reviews. And buy merch. We'll start pushing merch more in the coming weeks, I think, outside of Discord.
We want to make sure we have enough Sacred shirts. And so we're just kind of waiting on an order right now.
Okay, cool.
So
all right, perfect.
It'll be soon.
Soon enough. Soon. All right, my friends. Well, thank you all out there. Thank you guys. And until next time, goodbye.
See ya.
Take care, guys.
Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is proudly recorded in the USA. The show is conceived by, is written by, and is directed by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-hosts are Chris Raygun Maldonado and Dustin Furman. The show is produced by executive producer Dustin Furman. It's edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by my best friend, Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand's shows, including Sacred Symbols, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer level on Patreon, our highest tier, and we're grateful for your thoughtful and kind contributions to our independent endeavor. Thank you.